Councilmember Milner,
Present.
Councilmember Tomchop,
Here.
Councilmember Turner,
Present.
Vice Mayor,
Here.
and the chairman is present. With that, Ms. Barr, would you introduce item number 1, please?
Council item of special interest, recycling.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here to provide staff report today on item number 1 is Michelle Witenko, our Director of Field Operations.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. A moment while I get the presentation up for everybody. Mayor and Council, this is the results of the council item of special interest. This council item was presented to council at the January 14th, 2020 council workshop, at which point we got consensus from council to move forward with this item. The request was for a recycling program update. It was to include determining the citizens' interest in recycling, do an economic analysis, and come back with some program recommendations. And so that's what we're going to do today. So just as a way of refresher, we did discuss with council a little bit about recycling back in 2019, but I just wanted to update these slides to reflect what's happening now as of 2021. So with newsprint, paper products are about 80% of what is or what was recycled in the U.S. Newspaper tonnage is about 75% down what it was in the year 2000. That's as we've gone from paper products to much more electronic products. Plastics, since 2000, have become much more lighter weight, meaning that the actual thickness of the plastic is much less. There are many more new types, and most of these are not recyclable. Water bottles, for example, are now twice as light, so for us to reach that end product takes twice as many for us to process as it did in the past. From 2000 to 2021, the cardboard tonnage that we receive at our recovery facility is down 40%. While that's somewhat bad news, the good news is 92% of cardboard in the U.S. is actually recycled. When I discussed this with Mr. Friedline, he didn't believe me. He's like, how is that possible with all the Amazon and other online shopping I do? So we looked into it a little bit, and we found out that cardboard production's actually up a fair bit recently, but what we found was that there's been many increased box sizes. So boxes used to come in just several standard sizes. There used to be 11 standard sizes. They now consider 27 standard, and much of these online producers or online retailers are able to create their own boxes. The other issue we've got is many of the large cardboard boxes don't fit nicely into the curbside containers, and so they may end up being recycled other ways. But our inbound tonnage to our material recovery facility is down 40% in the last 20 years. The other thing with aluminum cans, they've been relatively constant. 5% are recycled outside of programs where they actually you pay a deposit and then get reimbursed when you do it. But our component at our recovery facility is really low. It's about 1%. And really the reason for that is there's many other markets out there where you can return your aluminum cans back in and get cash on the spot. I've also updated this since 2019, and this goes back to the year 2020 where I had a full year of data. Don't try and add these numbers up because these don't all add up. They're relative to one another. So there are kind of 4 things that make up recycling. The first one is the actual cost to process that. And if you look at it from 2014 to 2020, costs have gone up from about $110 a ton to $122 a ton. And in 2014, we were able to, costs were a little bit lower because the material was a little bit cleaner. We were able to process a little bit faster, and it was heavier. It allows us to speed up the processing a little bit. In 2020, the cost went up because the processing, because of the many different types of materials require new technology, and there's higher cost of labor. The next column we've got there talks about residual, and residual really describes that item that should be recyclable, and under normal conditions would be recyclable, but cannot be recovered. So for example, now that these plastic bottles have become really lightweight, if I don't completely empty this out, the machine will assume it's rejected because it's too heavy. And so the amount of material that could be left in it has decreased from about 2 ounces to under an ounce today because the actual plastic is so lightweight. And it's just, it's part of our automation process. So our cost of having those materials has actually increased by about 30% because of that. The next one is the commodity values. This is what we can get for what we sell the material for. And this has decreased by about 50% in the last 6 years. And this is due largely to, in 2014 was the end of us being able to sell overseas. We had strong markets in China and other locations overseas, and those markets have completely closed off on us now. And we've had to look for internal markets here in the U.S., and the markets just didn't exist. And so the commodity pricing, what we've able to get for this material is decreased substantially. And the final cost we really got is for collection. And our costs for collection have also decreased dramatically since that time frame, and that really goes back to that labor cost as well as the cost of fuel and technology. So really, what does this come down to? It's that there are challenges with recycling today, and that is the tonnage of the material that you can actually sell and market has gone down. The ability to sell those products has become increasingly challenging, and when you can sell them, the price that you get from them has gone down. And there's also market competition. As there is value in some of these commodities, other people are picking up and collecting them, whether they collect them through third parties, or you see a lot of the aluminum resellers along the side of the road. There has been increased market competition in that. And also, as we go to sell some of the things, there are fewer buyers. And so the pricing we don't get, we get is much lower, sorry. And also the challenge is the cost of actually recycling. With the increased labor, the cost to sort, the cost to collect and repair costs. But the bottom line really is the revenues are not covering the expenses. So really when we get to the operational challenges with our material recovery facility, we are currently not covering I want to make sure the mayor and council are aware that our material recovery facility today is not currently operational, and that's due to equipment breakdowns and a fire that we had. So we are working on getting things cleaned up and back, and so we've got some alternative options that we are working through. But I want to make sure that we're aware of that. And part of the equipment breakdown is there's really been no significant upgrades to the material recovery facility since 2000. There have been maintenance activities and that, but we have not gone in and done significant upgrades. There is that increase.
May I ask a question regarding that? When did this happen, and how long have you been not recycling? Basically, is that what you're saying? You're not recycling right now?
Mayor and council members, Councilmember Melnar, the fire happened in middle of March, and we are currently recycling. We put a plan in place. It happened on a Friday night, Saturday morning. We put a plan in place, and we're running pilot projects to see what it would take and what others can do, and I'll get more into that later in the presentation. all the recycling material we currently collect through residents and through our few commercial customers are being processed and sold, and they are being recycled today, just not at our material recovery facility. One of the other challenges we have at our material recovery facility that we've been asked several times is we cannot handle glass. We just cannot process the glass out of the material, and that causes us to have lower paper prices because we end up with glass shards within the paper, and we simply cannot add it in unless we want to completely rebuild our material recovery facility. And one of the other problems we have is that we cannot capture those small pieces of paper and cardboard. They're just, our machinery can't capture it. I do want to mention that when we talk about glass, we have looked at alternative options to help serve our residents. We have advertised an RFP and asked if people would collect glass, would accept glass, what could we do? The first RFP we had no responses to. So we took the opportunity, we called a bunch of vendors around that we knew worked for others, and we were able to get one response on the second time, but the bid on that was a cost of $20 per ton plus the cost of transportation. So we're looking for alternative ways to possibly offer glass to the residents. So on to today's presentation. What we're going to cover is essentially the results of what was requested. We're covering the council request for the resident survey, request for an in-depth operational analysis of economics, and then some recommendations off of that. So to start with our recycling survey, on the week of October 19th, we mailed a postcard to almost 55,000 residential accounts, and this is everybody that had a water bill, a current water bill at that time. And this the survey was open to all our residents between October 19th and November 16th. The survey was developed by staff with the help of an outside consultant, HCP Associates, and there were 10 questions within this survey. It would take, we estimated, up to 10 minutes. In reality, it would take about 3 or 4 minutes to complete. The survey was available in English and in Spanish. It was posted on the website. So there was a link on our main page of the website to the actual survey. Postcards also directed residents to that link, or also allowed them to call in. So if they called the customer service number, they were able to respond anonymously, as they were online as well. And then our social media staff here at the city, who do a phenomenal job, actually had posts up several times a week on Twitter and Instagram. And again, all responses to the survey were anonymous. The survey results, we had almost 7,300 respondents to that, and that's absolutely phenomenal. So that represents about 13% of households eligible, and at a 95% confidence level, those results have a margin of error of plus or minus 1%, which is just absolutely phenomenal. So that makes it a very statistically valid survey. We have provided council, I think in early January, with a full copy of the survey. I gave you a copy of the survey, and we're working right now with getting it posted to this workshop agenda, so it's also available to the residents as well. A typical response for a survey is about 4%, so seeing that 13% is an exceptional response to it. We did look at the results geographically as well, and we found out that the results were also statistically valid for all areas, and we couldn't divide it up by council district, but we were able to look at it by days of the week that we serve those customers, and we found each of those areas were also significantly valid. Again, at a 95% confidence level, we had a 3.2% margin of error for the lowest, and that's still considered very phenomenal. Some of the more significant findings of this survey, I'm going to go to those questions right now. I'm starting really with question 4, and the reason for that is the first 3 questions were really qualifying questions. They kind of weeded out those people that wanted to take a survey but were not our Glendale residents. So they asked, where did you live? What day of the week do you get service? So we were able to determine that all our survey respondents were serviced by residential services. We also then looked at those people that replied only those first 3 questions, and if that's all they replied to, they're not included in that 7,300 total respondents. So those that did not make it to question 4 are not included in the survey results. What we did find, though, question 4 we asked in the survey was, how important is it to members of your household to recycle? And we found out 84% said it's very important or important. Question 5, we asked, how frequently do you put your container out for service? Is it weekly, every other week, once a month, once every 2 months or so, or never, I don't recycle? And the results of this, 62% said they put it out every week, and 27% said every other week. The purpose really of this question was to gauge the tolerance within our residents for changes in the frequency of collection, and I'm going to touch more on that a little bit later too. And I apologize, for some reason I don't have the latest version of this. This would be a lot easier to see breaking up into 2 slides, so I do apologize for that. So question 6 asked, would you support an increase up to $1.60 a month to maintain your current once per week collection of recycling? Of that, 62% said yes. But of that 38% that said no, 28 of the 38 said yes to question 7. And so that left 10% overall that said no overall. Then if we look at the bottom half of that, question 7 asked, would you support a reduced service level to limit the cost increase associated with recycling? Of that, 57% said yes, and 43% said no. But of those 43% that said no to question 7, 33 said yes to question 6. And overall, only 10% said no to both. So in the end, 90% of our respondents would pay more for recycling collection, but between $1 and $1.60 a month. Question 8A asked about changes to the bulk trash service, but only 2% of the respondents said they would be supportive to eliminate that service, so we're not going to discuss it further today. It may be something we look at in the future, though, as well. Question 8B was would you support reducing or eliminating the free disposal at the landfill? So a little bit of background is, as part of our residential solid waste service, we allow residents to go and use our landfill up to 12 times per year, which is once per month, at the landfill for up to 2,000 pounds per trip, and that is built into the charge that we pay, that $21.80 per month. And we asked this question really for 3 reasons. We found that our customer service at the landfill needs to be improved. We have long wait times, and it's these small loads, it's residents and others like that that really contribute to it. The time they take on the scale, not knowing what they're doing. So we wanted to address the customer service. The second one really is safety. If you've ever seen children out there with our solid waste equipment, they're absolutely enthralled with this equipment. And we caution our new drivers as they come on that kids will come out and they want to see you pick up containers. You need to be very careful with them because they don't understand how dangerous it might be as you put that container back down. Well, the same thing happens at the landfill. These kids want to get out of that vehicle and they want to come over and see what's happening, so we have to be very careful with these children. And third reason really is operational at the landfill. As we continue to go higher up in the south cell, the actual area we've got available to operate becomes smaller and smaller, and so we've got people pushed closer and closer together. So it's an operational issue trying to keep the big loads and the commercial vehicles apart from these smaller ones as well. So those were the reasons why we asked the question. 54% of residents said they would be willing to reduce the service to 6 times per year. 25% said they would prefer, 25% said they would be willing to eliminate or just had no change to the service, and 21% said we could eliminate this service. I do want to let Mayor and Council know that we did look also at our landfill records, and we can look back and see who are residential users and who are not. And we found out that it's less than 1% of our residents actually use the landfill more than 6 times per year. So the impact to the people that would use it 12 times per year is much greater, much less than that, so much less than 1%. And we do find that those people that are in there 6, 7, or more times per year are actually some people really with a landscaping business that are just trying to sneak in or maybe trying to bypass the system.
Thank you. I'm just curious how we track that. What kind of technology? How do they know if somebody's, exceeding their allowed visits?
So Mayor and Council members and Councilmember Tomlichoff, when you go to the landfill, as a resident, they ask you to verify, and we can use a driver's license or any other sort of identification now. We take a daily download from the customer service billing system, and so we know who's associated with which house, and we then mark that account that they've used it for that month, and we track it that way. So we do know who's using it and how much they're using it for.
So, Mayor, so it's essentially a manual tracking system, though?
Mayor and Councilmember Tomlichoff, is within our Scale software system, so it's the same system that we then send the upload to Munis for that does the billing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So the end result of our survey, Mayor and Council, is that 97% of residents, of respondents, not to the residents, but just those that responded, felt their residential collection services were very good or good, and I'll echo that. The number of complaints I get from residents over this service is very, very low. So that's all I really wanted to discuss today with the survey. I'd be happy to stop at this point and answer any questions you may have had on the survey itself. So I do want to now move on to recycling economics, and it's really, we talk a little bit about regional markets, but we found out doing the research that regional markets really reflect the U.S. markets as well. So the first one we looked at was mixed paper. And I did update this graph. It's not shown in front of you, so we did update it through 2020, and we're seeing just a slight increase on that. Mixed paper tends to be is our phone books, our magazines, junk mail, and then office paper as well. What we've seen over time is supply has gone down, but demand has also decreased dramatically. So paper mills and that type of thing are seeing the need for the decrease and the decrease continuing. 28% of our inbound material is mixed paper, but we've seen an 82% reduction in revenue for mixed paper since 2016. Looking at plastics, HDPE, this one shown here, tends to be our laundry detergent, those type bottles. This is the pricing there recently has gone up, and over time since 2014 to 2021 or 2020 has gone up 30%. It represents a very small component of our system. It's less than 2.5%. I do want to talk about the other.
Hold on.
What slide number are you on? Because I'm looking at the link on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm on slide 17.
Okay, well, I don't have slide 17. This is my slide 17.
Oh, could you go on to slide 18? Maybe I should be pulling that one down because that's also the presentation I have in front of me.
Slide 18 is paper, so I
Yeah.
can use the paper. I usually follow along digitally, and it's not matching up, so I'm confused.
No. No, they've got a presentation uploaded 3 weeks long, 3 weeks old. The other plastics are PET, which is the water bottle, so our clear plastics. These also make up a very small percentage, less than 3% of our inbound material, and the price for PET has gone down. Polyethylene has gone down 40% from 2014 to 2020. Our other plastics are the same. Plastics 3 through 7, very small component of our inbound material, about 5% of the inbound material, and those have gone down substantially as well. Aluminum, very small component of our inbound, and it's been down 30% in that same time frame. While we look at it, our processing costs have also changed. Minimum wage is what we're showing on this graph here. Our processing is very labor intensive. Labor makes up about 75% of our cost to process, and that's just because it's just very manually intensive with the way you have to pick out what you can sell today or month to month. And so this just shows our minimum wage in Arizona. We've gone from $6.90 in 2008 to $12.15 in 2021, which from a person perspective, a human perspective, this is great. But if you look at just that recent increase, it's almost doubled on us. And so the stress on our ability to recover our revenue has become increasingly difficult.
Okay. Mr. Tanko, on that last chart with the minimum wage, so that's tracking the minimum wage in the state of Arizona. Have we only been paying minimum wage for those positions out there, or have we been paying above minimum wage? How does our experience track?
Mayor and council members, Councilmember Turner, thank you. That's a great question. We have always paid more than minimum wage, and it's approximately, I can't say approximately, I don't know the percentage more than that, but I do know when it was $6.90 in 2018, we were paying $7.50. The minimum wage currently is $12.15, and we had to increase our contract to $18 to get workers recently.
Thank you.
I was trying to demonstrate the relative percentage that it's gone up. And I think whether we look at our labor or the actual minimum wage in Arizona, the percentage increase is the same. We also then look at the cost to collect, and it has increased from 2008 to 2017 relatively steadily, and then increased more significantly since then. So we're seeing about a 30% increase from 2014 to 2020. And this is just also represents our increased cost in benefits and wages, the landfill fees, and equipment costs associated with collection. I do want to let you know that this is not a Glendale issue, so we looked to find out what others are doing. Recently, and this is in the past 2 years, Mason Goodyear did stop their recycling program. It was temporary, and they have since restarted it. Surprise also stopped their program. They've had some conversations about restarting it, but have not done so yet. Casa Grande, Sierra Vista ended their program, and Tucson has gone to every other week frequency, so they've reduced their collection frequency. Again, also not an Arizona problem.
I was just going to ask, the cities that restarted Mason Goodyear, did they make changes to the program before restarting?
Mayor, council members, Councilmember Thomas Schaaf, there were no significant changes that they made, and we are working with them to find out why they stopped, why they restarted. But a lot of it is just that economics. There was a point there in 2019, 2020, where we couldn't sell materials, and we had the ability to hold on to them for a little bit and then wait till the markets changed. they may have chosen to do that because of that. I do know Surprise stopped because of the economics of it.
Well, I was just curious, Mayor, if I could, if whether they resumed because they adjusted their fees or their collection schedule, or they just basically resumed at the same cost and the same schedule as what they were doing before.
Mayor and council members, Councilmember Tomachoff, I don't have that information. We can look into that
Okay,
and get back to you on that one.
thank you.
And so, to go on with what Councilmember Tomachoff was saying, all of them restarted their programs during COVID happening?
Mayor, the two that restarted their programs, Mesa and Goodyear, have been recent. So it wasn't at the beginning of COVID, it would be towards the end of COVID. I don't remember the exact date, but I know it's within the past 7 to 9 months or so. So it would be towards the tail end of COVID.
Okay, well, we were still eyeball deep in it 7 months ago. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I did some researching after, just now actually, after reading through your presentation, and in fact, there is a reduction in recycling for municipalities nationwide. Some are getting really creative. One state in Florida is incinerating their recyclables and then turning that into energy, selling it off into the grid. I know we burn off our gas over here. Florida isn't burning plastics, just papers, cardboard, and whatever else can be incinerated. Is that something we're looking at, or are we looking to other things that are creative, such as some of the other states in the nation?
Mayor and council members, Councilmember Aldama, there are many places that are actually sending their recyclables off to be incinerated. With our landfill gas, we are looking, and an RFP will be issued here in the next several weeks. We are looking for options as to what to do with that. We found that to convert it to electricity was not a viable option. We are looking at, could we possibly clean it up and inject it into a gas pipeline and sell it as renewable natural gas. There are options to incinerate paper. You still get more money, though, if you can actually find a buyer for the raw paper product to reuse it into paper.
Thank you.
But those are some of the changes that we were going to go into nationally. Many have responded, as we did here in Arizona, by reducing or stopping the programs. Philadelphia sends over half their recyclables to an incinerator. They do not process them and return them into something else. They do convert them into electricity. There are several places in Florida as well, and there are other places such as Indianapolis that added a fee for recycling. So if you want to recycle and you live in Indianapolis, you pay $100 a year, and they've seen a very low response to that. They've only had 10% of their residents sign up for that program. So what we looked at, and
If I could, just to add a little more information with reference to the other cities, in Mesa and I think in a couple others, the recycling programs are now more selective. They're asking for less materials, type of materials that are going into the recycle barrel. So they're getting lower percentages, but they're being more efficient, working with the resident to take a higher percentage of what's collected and marketing it into the system. So ultimately, you know, if it continues to get that way, it's more likely that the cities might want to look at maybe every other week collection because they have less volume in that. But that's where I think it's leading to. And in long term, I'm hoping that we do less dependency on overseas markets, and we bring it back to what it used to be in the 70s and 80s, and we had a lot of recycling plants in this country, and the market was pretty steadfast, and we didn't have to worry about it. So, you know, a lot of things we're really in a huge dynamic stage right now, and I think as we move along, we'll have to continue to update City Council with reference to that. Thank you.
And so before I get into this slide, if you just want to bear with me, I'm going to be asking for consensus later on, but I just want to discuss some of the options that we've got in front of us today. One way to continue with our recycling program we would have to look at completely rebuilding our material recovery facility. As I said, we've done no substantial upgrades to that facility since 2000, really since it was built. And we have gone through a couple companies and looked at different estimates, and we're looking at currently today $18 million as a capital investment to rebuild that facility. What that would allow us to do is capture those smaller pieces of paper that we currently can't capture today and give us better technology such that the stuff that gets through our plant in residuals, we could capture and be able to sell those, such as the water bottles with a small amount of water in them. Just the basic math on that $18 million, if we wanted to recover that money in 10 years, that's about a $2.80 cost per month per resident. And I just want to keep you, or remind you that is a capital estimate only. There still are the operating costs associated with the material recovery facility. That's about $2.5 million a year. And if we look at that, that's $3.80 per month per household is what it costs to process recyclables. Option 2 is really to outsource our material recovery facility processing services. And the reason I'm bringing this up to you is our facility is bound by, we've only got 12,000 to 15,000 tons of inbound material annually. All the neighboring cities are all tied up in contracts with others, and that isn't a tonnage amount that makes sense. We cannot run 40 hours per week or 36 hours per week as a processing plant should operate at optimal speed. And so really our processing costs are higher than they should be because we're bound by that amount of volume that comes into it. So we looked at, could we possibly outsource this service? So we issued a request for statement of qualifications to find out companies out there that could do this. Maybe they could come in and look at our facility. Would they put in the capital? Would they upgrade it? Or could we drive it to them, and could they process it there? What we're seeing today, and the reason I brought up the Friedman or the recycling fire and that our MRF was shut down is we took that option in towards the end of March to start a pilot project to see what would it take and what would the cost be to the city. And really the costs are really market driven. It really does depend on what we get back from the markets. Worst case scenario, what we're seeing is if there was a no value to the commodity, it would be a net zero. It wouldn't cost the city any more, but it wouldn't save us anything. But based upon about our 2 months of actually sending the material to different locations, we are seeing that we can do a conservative estimate of about a $350,000 annual savings on processing the materials.
Let me stop you there. $350,000 of savings, and our taxpayers are not paying any more money. Is that correct?
Mayor, that's correct.
Well, I'm liking this already. Go ahead.
Mayor, so do we have to transport it somewhere, or this would include the cost of, I guess, somebody basically taking over the collection of our recyclables, or give me a little snapshot of what you're talking about here.
Thank you. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Talenshaw, this is for recycling processing services. So what we've done for the past 2 months to see what would work, what wouldn't work, is our trucks have gone along and collected, and then we've, instead of going to our material recovery facility, we've sent them to two other locations. One is Waste Management up in Surprise, just off the US 60, and the other is Friedman, which is located in downtown Phoenix. What we've been able to see with, even though there's been a slight increase in overtime and mileage on the trucks, because the processing costs are less, is that overall we would see a $350,000 in annual savings. And I'm saying that's a conservative estimate because in a couple slides I'm going to ask Mayor and Council for consensus to continue to negotiate and see if we can enter into contracts with these companies.
Okay, thank you.
So in summary of this presentation, we found that residents overwhelmingly support continuing the recycling program. If you remember back to this survey results, the survey showed an exceptional response with 13% of households responding to the survey, and 84% found that recycling was important or very important to them. We also found through the survey that residents are willing to pay more to continue the program. 90% said they would pay between $1 and $1.60 to continue the program. So, Mayor and Council, what we're asking for today, if you just give me a moment, I'll get through this, and what staff's recommending is that we continue the recycle program, and if these contracts allow it, we can add glass to our program. And to do so, we would also then recommend we outsource our material recovery facility processing services. And what this would benefit us is it would maintain our current rate structure and it would allow us to add glass into the program. And then the third recommendation that we're making that we're going to ask for consensus on is adjusting these number of free loads from 12 per year to 6 per year. And again, the benefits of this really are the customer service, the safety, and the operational needs at the landfill. So with that, Mayor, I'm asking for a consensus on any or all of these items.
I've got some questions for you. So starting with number 3, if I remember right, you said in your presentation that it really is only about 1% of people that violate that, that exceed that, and that's typically people that have businesses and they're trying to sneak in. Is that correct?
Mayor, that's anecdotally, that's what we'd say. It might be those businesses trying to sneak in, but we found that 1% of our residents use the landfill 6 times per year, and less than that would use it more than 6 times per year. So by adjusting the number of loads down from 12 to 6, we would be impacting less than 1% of our residents.
Okay, well, and that was sort of what I was pointing out. If it's affecting less than 1%, why are we even messing with it? Because it's such a small amount. At the same time, people that have a special project, maybe they're doing some home remodeling, things like that, where they may have to make 2 or 3 loads all within a short time, it seems to me that they'd be penalized. And I don't, myself, I may not go out to the landfill at all for a year and a half, and it seems like I may be doing some big projects where I have to go out there several times within a short time. So that's a little concerning to me. I don't abuse it. If I could have bulk trash pick it up and know that I'm not going to violate, that time, I would rather take it out and get it out of there and not have to worry about it. But I think what you might be doing, if you try to adjust that number 3, I think you may just have more people piling up bulk trash, and I don't know if the city, for 1%, is really going to benefit from that when you're affecting everybody. I don't like that. I'd just as soon leave that 1 per month personally, because I think that the downside to it is people are going to use bulk trash more. And then what did you accomplish? We're paying people to do what we were getting for free. People were bringing in their own loads before. Outsource, I love that. I absolutely support that 100%. The recycling, I don't mind the recycling, but the adding glass, I'd like to know what our cost would be on the glass. And if we have to charge more money to accept glass, that sort of concerns me. If we're saving money on outsourcing on number 2 and we have to charge more for glass, then what are we looking at truly as far as adding more cost to the taxpayer?
Mayor and council members, so let's consider 1 and 2 together. If we outsource our processing services and add glass in, that was the conservative estimate I provided you with, a $350,000 annual savings.
And that's including adding the glass?
Mayor, that's correct.
Oh, okay, well, that's an easy one. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with you, Mayor. The first thing I thought of was reducing down the number of free loads to the landfill is probably going to increase the amount of stuff people put out for bulk trash, and then we're, as the mayor said, paying people to pick it up, paying people to pick up what people were delivering to the landfill themselves. So I don't know whether that's really a good idea or not. The same amount of trash is going to be generated. We're not going to change that. So it's going to have to go somewhere. If somebody doesn't want to have to pay to go to the dump, they're going to put it at the curb, and we're going to pay somebody to pick it up. So I think probably we leave that alone. That's my opinion.
Mayor, thank you. On the number of free loads per year, so if you have somebody that's got a landscaping business, they're probably going to have to go a couple of times a week, aren't they? So you'd have people that were well out of, you know, the 6 or even 12 trips a year. So is there a way that we would identify that and maybe we get something back from that?
Yeah. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Turner, I told you an anecdotal story, and the reason I brought that up was about a year ago, they were trying to show me the lines and that, and I came out there, and this person came up to the scale, and I'm like, well, they're residents, and the cashier at the scale house said, no, they're in 3 times a week. I know this person, they just change vehicles on the weekend, and they try and get in for free. And the person laughed at them and said, yeah, I'm trying. So that was the story. I don't know if that happens all the time, or that was just the one with me. So this adjusting free loads from 12 to 6, you know, like I said, it's less than 1% of our residents that use it more than 6 times per year. So the number of residents that it actually impacts and the tonnage that it impacts, this is less than 2,000 tons per year that it actually would potentially be diverted to bulk trash. But the change to the rest of our residents, the increased customer service, the increased safety, we think the benefits outweigh that risk that it may also go then just to bulk trash and be picked up in a different way.
If I could continue, it really seems, you know, that 1% seems like an extremely small number that we would actually be impacting. How would it be handled? You kind of described the system that you use, but how would it be handled if we went to 6 loads a year when they arrived for their 7th time? Is our system capable of flagging that, and then would they have to pay a charge at the window instead of free, or what would you do?
Mayor and council members, Councilmember Turner, yes, our system would be capable of flagging that they've now been more than 6 times, and from this point on, it would be a charge.
Yeah, so I think the question I might have heard is if we could flag them at 6, we could flag them at 12. Then that way people would still have, in essence, the opportunity to go once a month, or we could possibly even flag them to where they can go once a month. You know, in any 30-day period, they get 1 trip. But again, to the point, if you're doing a project, either, you know, cleaning up your own yard or doing a remodeling in the house or something like that, then you don't want to wait a whole month before you can take your second load to the dump. So, yeah, I haven't yet been seeing the wisdom to limiting the number of trips unless we were limiting it at something higher than 6, probably at 12. Try to capture that person that's there 2 or 3 times a week and, you know, on a consistent ongoing basis. That might be worth trying to recoup some revenue from. But other questions that I had, well, just one observation is that we're dealing with this problem, and you've given us a list of other cities that are, and I wonder if perhaps we shouldn't be looking at a regional approach to this, and that maybe this isn't a challenge that MAG could undertake and try to come up with a regional solution to the recycling issue and to get the economies of scale involved such that we could have a regional approach. We do wastewater regionally, different things like that, and this seems like, to me, like it might be one that would be good for that. The residents, so we have 90% of our residents put their recycling can out at least every other week or every other week, so 90% of them. Do we have any idea of how full the can is when it goes out? Is this just something people are doing out of habit, or you know, are they putting out a can that's 3/4 full at that regularity?
Mayor, council members, Councilmember Turner, that's a great segue into what I wanted to bring up as to future items for discussion. Is we are tracking the data on how much of these containers put out every week. how full they are, and the ones that put out every other week, how full they are. And one of the items that we're going to recommend we come back to you with is considering collection of recyclables on a bi-weekly basis. And it's just that we've looked at now the material we've got in the containers. If it was cleaner, could we do this? And so we want to come back and talk to council about potentially collecting recyclables every other week. We think because collection costs are increasing, this would be a great way to minimize any future rate increases. We're still working through that, and I'd like to come back with that item for discussion. But I think you've hit it exactly there, is even the people that put it out every week, how full are these containers? And we do have that data, I just don't have that here with me today.
Yeah, and I realize that running the route every week is going to have a certain expense to it. If we can run it only every other 2 weeks, then we'll have savings. But I know I've encouraged through my e-newsletter residents, wait till your recycling is half or more full before you put it out, just to minimize the number of stops and have greater fuel efficiency, less wear and tear on the brakes and other equipment, things like that. So I'd be interested in, when you do have data as to how full the cans are when they go out, that would be good to know. Do we have a fine for putting non-recyclable items into a recycling bin?
Mayor, council members, Councilmember Turner, no, we do not. What we do have, though, is essentially what we call a 3-strike program, where after your container has been contaminated, not slightly contaminated, but it's almost like you're using it as a garbage container. After 3 times, we take that away from you and don't allow you within our recycle program.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is an interesting issue, but I do think that I missed something over there. If we can continue to outsource this recycling at a reasonable price or savings, and it is a popular program with our residents. In the research I've been doing, this articles I've read, and I think some others have as well, it almost feels like this recycling program for the last 20 years has been a hoax foisted on Americans, that material really doesn't get recycled and that so much of it was getting shipped and dumped overseas, and that it certainly makes us feel good about putting plastic into a recycling bin, but it's not really making a difference environmentally unless that plastic gets remade into something else, and whether another product or energy. And quite a bit of what I've been reading makes me feel like, yeah, this isn't really working. So I don't know what the future of recycling is, but I'm not sure I'm ready to toss it out, so to speak, here in Glendale. Thanks.
Briefly, and then I'll get to both of you. I think one of the things that we, and Councilmember Turner touched on it, but he didn't really elaborate on it. I think legislative-wise, that what we need to do is the cities need to, as all of our cities, 91 cities and towns, need to move our legislature to try to start figuring out ways that we can mandate certain types of bottles that are recyclable, whether that happens to be with a deposit, those type of things. Now, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying that it's discussion that needs to happen. When it gets to the point where we're losing money or taxpayers are paying money for something that's not getting the job done, it seems like there's a much more efficient ways of doing it. The technology's there in many ways, but if the bottle is so thin that a few drops of water inside the water bottle rejects it, well, then what did you accomplish? You know, there's, I think a thicker plastic might be better, possibly deposit on cans. I don't know, but it's something that I think that, and again, he touched on it, you know, maybe Maricopa Association of Governments could come up with, you know, some group of folks that could study that and make recommendations to the legislature. Maybe we get some legislation that would affect the state. Glendale can't mandate a type of bottle in the grocery stores because our landfill is going to end up with bottles from the cities surrounding us. So it's got to be done not regionally, but it's got to be done statewide. So with that said, we're going to have 2 other people that want to speak so far. Do we have a consensus, or are you ready to go to the consensus right now and still speak, or do you want to speak first?
Okay, I just wanted to, other than the change in perhaps adding glass, are we still going to be staying at the same level of recyclable material types? Or could you review that with us very quickly, what would be included in these types of, this type of a recycling program that's outsourced?
Mayor and council members, Councilmember Melnar, we are in discussion with both those locations as to what their technology allows them to recycle. And the one thing that we want to be very cautious on is we have, and not Glendale, but we as an industry have in the past confused our residents. One city will tell them you put this in, another one will tell you you can put this in, and we want to be somewhat consistent. But from our preliminary conversations with both of these locations, their technology is able to sort out the different types of plastics better than we can, and we may be looking at, over time, at expanding the program, assuming that we can do it in a long-term type fashion and it economically makes sense to us. So we are in those discussions now.
Okay, thank you. Otherwise, I'm in favor of moving this forward.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, with 90% of our residents want to recycle, and they want to do the right thing, and we've talked about this before, is I think we have to do a better job of educating them what they should and should not be putting in their recycle can, because that's where the cost comes in, is sorting all that stuff out of recycle that can't be recycled. 3 through 7, people don't know that. So I'd like to see a really robust campaign to engage. Obviously, our citizens want to recycle and want to do the right thing, so would be, I think, invested in not putting things in the recycle can that they shouldn't. But I think we need to take the responsibility for the fact that we haven't done a good job explaining to them what they should and shouldn't put in their container. So, you know, social media, whatever we do, but I think part of that responsibility lies on us, is that they're trying to do the right thing, and they throw their Tide container in there because it's plastic, and they don't know. Most people, when you tell them, look on the container, and they don't even know there's a number on the container. So I think, you know, I feel like we need to take some responsibility to put the onus on us to educate our residents and let them know what they should and shouldn't. That'll bring the cost down. If we have less stuff in there that doesn't belong in there, it's going to save us money. So, and educating people is free. So I agree, though, I think we should move in the direction of, and I don't know what the penalties are if we end up having a bunch of non-recyclable stuff that we're sending to somebody else's MRF. What happens then? Are we going to start getting dinged for that? So I think we should start educating our residents on what they can and cannot put in the recycle container. That's it for me. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. And to the council member's point just now, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that it involves both the carrot and the stick. We need to do better at explaining what we do accept, but we also have to be able to move with the market, and so providing, well, and then there's this, I'll get back to that, and then there's the stick. I think that perhaps having the potential of a fine for putting things in the recycling that shouldn't be there is something that would get people's attention to help inspire them to find out what is recyclable and what isn't. And I'm not necessarily saying on a first offense, but the idea that, you know, and I still think that a nice big label on the top of our recycling bins, either stuck on or embedded at manufacturer, that says simply recycling only, $150 fine, a website, and a phone number. And that way people can go to a website and see what's currently we're accepting in recycling, or they could go to a phone number that would have a recording. In Glendale, we're currently accepting these items only. And that, I hope, would help people to be more compliant. And then with the idea that there is potentially a fine at work would help to encourage them to be more rigorous in what they actually do put in there. But, because I've seen some pretty crazy stuff sticking out of recycling bins driving around the city. You know, I'm sorry, but those plastic, you know, mini blinds are not recyclable. They might be plastic, but that doesn't mean they're recyclable. And I just think we need to have both the carrot of better information and appealing to their environmental concerns, but also the stick of a potential fine if they don't comply. Make them think twice.
I wanted to add on, I think that's a good idea. And if we used a QR code rather than putting actual, you know, the information on the can, we have the ability then to modify it and change it as the market changes. If we just had a QR code that you could scan and say, here's what you can, here's what belongs in here. And then if we need to make changes, since it's only a QR code, then we can change the information without having to go back out and put more labels and stuff out. But I think that's a really good idea.
Okay, so consensus, item number 1, is everybody good with that? Okay, item number 2, everybody good with that? Okay, item number 3, I don't think I heard a consensus. Is there a consensus to alter to 6 times a year or leave it as it is? So item number 3, is there a consensus the way it's wrote up there? Okay, you good?
I'm sorry, I just didn't get the
1 and
last
2
one.
is yes,
And
number
3
3
is
is
no.
no.
Mayor, I have one more question, if
Go
I
ahead.
could, on the item number 1, the question of adding glass to the recycling. Is there a market for glass, for recycled glass?
Mayor and council members, Councilmember Turner, there is a market, but it costs you money to give it to them. So in other words, where you'd normally be able to sell something like this and get $20 for it, now you have to pay $20 for them to take it. So there is an end use for it, but it costs you money to do it. And there's just not the market here in Arizona for us to break into that. But the conversations we're having with these 2 vendors is, what are their costs and could we add it without hurting our system? So we are having those conversations, but currently we cannot add it.
Okay, so I guess I'm not certain of what the consensus was. Is it to definitively add glass to recycling, or that we're open to the opportunity to add glass if there's
Well,
if it makes financial sense?
I'd like to clarify, because I thought when I asked earlier, item number 1 and number 2, I believe my question was, if we did both of them, do we still end up with $350,000 to the positive? And I believe your answer was yes.
Mayor, you're
So we're
correct.
not paying any more money to add glass.
That's correct.
Okay, so I think the consensus was yes, as we will collect glass when available.
But if, for instance, we didn't collect glass, would we be $450,000 to the positive? Because we weren't having to pay
Probably more.
to have the glass taken away.
Mayor, I think we could take those 2 as one, where we look at outsourcing our material recovery processing services, knowing that's a contract that would come back to council. But right now, we are going to continue recycling, and if economically we can add recycling or add glass into the processing services and add it to collection, we do so. So I'll take it that way, where the glass is part of that processing service, is seen as long as there's a benefit to doing it, we add it that way. So 1 should be, we got the consensus to continue the recycling program, and 2 is outsource the processing services, and with that, can we maintain our rate structure, and what is the cost to add glass to the program?
Okay, well, I can tell you, of all the questions I get when it comes to recycling, the number 1 question is always, how come you guys don't take glass? I hear that over and over and over. In fact, I heard it today from my assistant. She said, the one thing that I'd be in favor of, and I said, well, but you don't live in Glendale. So that does seem to be the number 1 thing that I hear from people all the time is, why don't you guys take glass? And I said, we don't make any money at it. It costs us money. Okay, were you clear?
I'm good.
Okay, everyone else good? Okay, what else you have?
And it was just that final item that we asked the question on, do you put your container out weekly? Do you put it out bi-weekly? And the reason for that was we want to now look at the cost for collecting and see if we can change the way we collect, potentially move to bi-weekly. And so I'm not asking for consensus on this. I just I wanted to let you know why we asked the question, that we will be coming back to council with this item for discussion. So
Okay.
with that, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Item number 2.
Council item of special interest, Glen Lakes remnant parcel.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report on this item is Don Bessler. He's our Chief Capital Improvement Officer.
Thank you, City Manager Phelps, Mayor Wires, and council members. I am from the Engineering Department. I'm Don Bessler, and I'm here to report back on a council item of special interest that was brought forward on March 23rd by Councilmember Turner. It was to get support for creating a council item of special interest for the potential sale of the remnant parcel at the former Glen Lakes Golf Course. Staff met with Councilmember Turner and developed a scoping statement. Subsequently, we reviewed that scoping statement with the city manager as per the process the council has, and that scoping statement has been approved. It is in your packet, and I'm just going to walk through the high points of it and then identify the direction that we're looking for. As I mentioned, this item first came forward by Councilmember Turner on March 23rd. The purpose of it was threefold. One, the purpose of this request is threefold. One, to explain to the council that there is no identified future city use for that remnant parcel, which is about 1.46 acres. Two, that the purpose of this effort would be to ensure that there's a beneficial and contributing use to that property at some point in the future to enhance the neighborhood. And three, to take advantage of favorable market conditions that exist. The direction requested, I'll walk through those for you. The first one is council willing to consider the sale of this property? And if you have consensus, Mayor, we could take those one at a time, or I could just capture the bulk of it and then we can circle back, whatever is your pleasure.
Okay. So well, I've only got 4 people sitting here. I would like to wait on the consensus to get a couple more people.
Okay. Mayor, would it be okay if I walk through what the items of consensus would be, and then by then perhaps we'll be...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So one would be whether or not the council would consider the sale of this property. If the answer to that is yes, do you have a preference as to the type of sale that we would construct, whether it's a traditional broker, some sort of a self-performed sale through advertisement that the city would undertake? Is there a desire to have some level of neighborhood engagement in that process? What that looks like would have to be determined, but that's just a fundamental question. And the fourth one would just be an open RFP, allow the market to give proposals to the city and react to those proposals. Currently, the property is zoned A1, and the question would be, and typically we would do this, we would upzone the property to some end zoning that the city council desired prior to putting the property up into the marketplace. 4, are there any uses that the council would not want to consider for the use of this corner? And if so, we would want to know those, not necessarily today, but it would be something that would be vetted out through this process. And the 5th one would be, does council seek any suggestions from staff for the redevelopment, or do they have some other way that they would like to gather the level of interest in this property? Again, the property is about 1.48 acres. I think I said 1.46. It's on the corner of 55th and Northern. It's currently zoned A1. What that means is it's available to have 1 residential unit. And that's essentially it. As well, a little bit more on that, the zoning of A1, if it is to be rezoned, would be through a public process. That's the process that the city would use. It would also require a minor general plan amendment. And those 2 items can happen concurrently should the city decide to pursue that. Finally, the deliverables that we would come back with if this item moves forward today would be to come back to you at your August 24th workshop with an analysis of whatever direction you give us today, and provide that in a PowerPoint so that you have a little bit clearer understanding of all the elements that you've directed us to do and bring those back to you. And then we would go forward from that meeting with whatever consensus you derive. So whenever the mayor is ready, I'd be happy to circle back through the items of direction.
Okay, and just to be fair to this issue, I would have preferred that we had another council member here, being we're already short one.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I've got my scout out looking for my Indian right now.
If there's any questions that I could answer for the mayor or council in the interim, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I can go ahead and at least speak what I think. I think ideally we wouldn't want tattoo shops and hair salons and pedicures and quick trips, and I think the normal stuff that everybody thinks that we've got way too many already. I think we got way too many already. I'd like to see something that hopefully would be beneficial to that particular area of the community. But if people can't make a profit with their business, they certainly wouldn't want to buy the property. So you go back to the property itself, I'd like to open it up to an open market. I'd like to get our economic development team to give us some recommendations, what they think could be pertinent and helpful. But for us to decide what business we want there, the businesses have to want to be there, and so that's going to be our biggest problem. Is hoping that somebody shows an interest with something that we want. Certainly not interested in anybody build nuclear bombs or anything like that. And then I'd hope that the council would be open for changing the zoning to whatever accommodates that works. So that's just my thought. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is my item of interest, and I appreciate Mr. Bessler's meeting with me. And once that occurred, this is moving promptly, and I'm happy to see that. So I'm hopeful that the council will reach consensus on putting the property up for sale. The city apparently has no use for it. It is a eyesore, maintenance issue, attractive nuisance, and I think it's time that we move on past this. And with new development, new residential coming into the neighborhood too, I think it's a good time to do something, get this out there and make it productive for our residents. So I hope that we can reach yes on number one. As far as the method of sale, there's basically three of those are actually methods of sale. I don't know whether I think the idea of an RFP, basically we put it on the market and potential buyers would come to us with a proposal for what its end use would be, so that we're not just selling it and it stays a vacant lot for another 20 or 30 years. We just got through that process over at 59th and Northern, and we now have a credit union, a car wash, an auto parts store, and a fast food, and it's a big improvement over there than the empty dirt lot that's been there for a long time. So I'd like us to avoid, that it's just purchased to hold, so that therefore that would be probably my preference would be to do the option D, so that we're responding to proposals and we know what we're approving there, and then of course that the council would go ahead and zone the property appropriately for whatever that use would be, so that we can get the best value for the money. It's to our taxpayers' advantage that we rezone it to something beyond A1. And and then as far as things that I would suggest we would not consider, I think the city has a list of those that we wouldn't consider that often show up in our PAD rezonings, and adult uses and different things like that. I don't personally have a problem with hair salons that were mentioned a little bit ago, or some like that, but we may not want a title loan company there, or a few other uses. But I think that that's something we can consider as we go through the process, that yes, there might be some uses that we would not want to have there. And that's what I have for the moment. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council. So just from my perspective, I think probably the best thing to do would be to start with working with economic development to come up with the best land uses and bring that back and do the rezoning first. It's really difficult to put a for sale sign on a property with, you know, and get a lot of interest. So I think the first step we can do, we can come back very quickly, identify the type of zoning, so we can then exclude the types of things the council doesn't want to have on that site. I think that can be done in very quick order. Then once we have the zoning in place, then seek direction from the council on the best way at which to dispose. It could be, again, RFP, could be direct sell, whatever. But I think to try to market it first, telling the potential buyer that we're going to rezone it is a little bit awkward, and I think it just would be better means to gather value for this would be to do your rezoning first, get the type of land uses you want to have, and then immediately go to, you know, finding the right buyer for it.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with that. I wasn't in a hurry to sell it, but the market is favorable to the city to sell it. So your steps, won't repeat them, but your steps are right, spot on. And then my interest would be to control its destiny as much as possible. So I think that plan does that. We wouldn't, I mean, the mayor mentioned some of it, and Councilmember Turner mentioned some of what we wouldn't want there. So the best route, and then probably an RFP, so that we can control its destiny to the extent that whatever goes there is favorable to the neighborhood. That would be my interest.
Just that I would agree to move forward with the sale, and I believe that the city manager's recommendation of perhaps having a discussion on the zoning through economic development and then bring it back to council to rezone, that would make it, I think, more marketable, easier to market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to clarify what the city manager is talking about, saying that the economic development would decide what would be the most suitable zoning, or?
Mayor, members of the council, I think what I was suggesting is that they, you know, we could certainly get their input on what they think might draw the most amount of interest in terms of different type of land uses. But no, I wouldn't say leave the decision to them. I think it's important that the community and the council decide what type of development they want there. What I was trying to suggest is that if somebody says, well, let's make that a bank, and there's no market for the bank, then the property may sit there for a long time. So I was just suggesting that the economic development could kind of survey with the commercial brokerage, look what type of property seems to be in demand, and then as you go to consider your zoning, you can use that information to help determine what you would or wouldn't want to have there.
Mayor, if I could, well, I would think that, I mean, it's the parcel, at least in my opinion, is too small for a PAD. It's a half acre. So, but commercial is, you know, basically the I would think that's a very suitable site for some types of commercial. I know C2 doesn't, I don't think has any exclusions in there. So, but because it's adjacent to a neighborhood, I think we probably do want to have, you know, I don't know whether that, you know, C2 with some stipulations of things that you can't, you know, tattoo parlors, vape, you know, things that we don't want to have near neighborhoods. In there, but I think that probably C2, at least in my mind, is probably what that would be, and it would be, you know, maybe a little strip mall or something like that there. That would be, you know, something that maybe the neighbors would like to see, you know, coffee place or, you know, things like that. So it's a half. Oh, it's an acre and a half. Okay, well, still that's too small for a PAD. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's way too small for a PAD. I think it would probably just be C2, and then we would, so I would be fine with that, but I would want to at least have them, you know, allow for public input for things that they wouldn't want there, and then for the council, obviously we have the final decision on zoning anyway. But I just wanted to clarify that wasn't the zoning case. Would it be like the planning commission would be the applicant or something like that, or the city would be the applicant? Obviously, it would save somebody money if it's already rezoned, and then they wouldn't have to go through that process if they wanted to develop it.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Tomanchuk, I think we could either have the planning commission be the applicant or the city. We've done it on a number of occasions, have been the applicant. I think, and I didn't state this very clearly, I think by having economic development kind of understand where the market is at least would show you where you might garner the most interest. What you might find is that interest isn't something you want. So I would look at, for example, within many C2 uses, you could have a drive-through. That may or may not be what really fits the need of the community. So on one end, you could, you may want to say, we're willing to price it such and exclude drive-through, even though we know that's where the market might be at. So that's why I was trying to suggest they can at least give you the lay of the land of where we most likely would draw interest. And then once you understand where that interest is from, you may say, well, we may get interest there, but we don't want to have that because it would have too much impact on the community. But yes, we could be the applicant on it. And again, as Don said, we can run it concurrently with the minor general plan amendment change that will have to be done. And both of those should run through very quickly and very smoothly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Unless I misunderstood the manager's initial remarks, I don't know that it's to our benefit to determine the zoning specifically before we put it on the market and limit it to only certain uses. I mean, it may be that an office use would bring us the best return and would be most compatible to the neighborhood. There are other office uses, along that strip of Northern Avenue. Or it may be a commercial, a C2 might have a great, opportunity in there. I could see us saying we're willing to consider, zoning categories or, the PAD concept where we create the zoning specifically for that. But I don't know that it's our advantage to narrowly, say, oh no, we're only going to do C2 on this corner or office or whatever. There certainly would be zoning categories that would not be in the picture, but I think if the buyer knows that the city's willing to rezone it to be compatible with whatever they're proposing, provided we like the proposal. That's what I would like to see us perhaps be doing. But and I'm more than happy to have economic development, their input into what are some of the the more likely uses for that, more appropriate, most appropriate uses for that corner parcel there. Thanks.
Actually supportive of city manager's recommendation. So I guess I'll ask first, do we have a consensus for the city manager's recommendation, economic development to make a recommendation, and then for us at that point to go ahead and have it zoned, do you have a question?
Mayor, members of the council, yeah, I don't think I would be comfortable with this necessarily making a recommendation because we haven't really received input, but what we can do is the first step would be to do an analysis of the market within the area and try to see, what other types of properties would be competing with it, what other kind of uses, and then we use that as a foundation to decide what the next steps would be.
Right, and I wasn't using the proper verbiage, but we have to pick the path of direction that we want to go. Doesn't mean we have to stay on it, but at least that direction. So anyway, is there a consensus with that? Go ahead.
Make sure I understand. So basically, it's gonna come back to us once there's been some analysis done okay, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Yeah, we have a consensus. Are you good?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Okay, item 3.
2021 Water Services Rate Review.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff reports on item number 3 will be led by Craig Johnson, our Director of Water Services, and she'll be assisted by both Vicki Rios and Jack Friedline, Assistant City Managers.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. I've also been joined by some staff in the gallery here to answer any questions that may come up that I feel be more appropriate for them to answer. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Rios.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, we're going to talk about our ongoing rate study and some rate recommendations for the council. Sorry, let me get control of the slides here. Oops.
Want me to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so kind of the agenda today is to talk about the water and wastewater financial plan. We're going to talk about the work that was done by the Citizens Utility Advisory Commission and their recommendations. And then towards the end of the presentation, we do want to get council's direction on both the financial plans and the public outreach. And then we'll close with some potential dates for future council action. Whenever we do a rate study, we set out with setting the expectation with the consultant of the objectives of the rate study, and I'm going to go over those in a minute. And in addition to that, we have to make certain assumptions about how operating revenue is going to grow, for example, by growth and that type of thing, how the expenses are going to grow, and how much capital outlay is necessary. And then in addition to that, we give the rate consultant the council policies for their financial targets. So I'm going to go over each of these as we go. The first thing about the rate objectives in general is that we set out to make rates that are fair, just, and reasonable. We always consider these. We want the rates to provide a steady level of revenue and some predictability. We do, as we said earlier, want to maintain all the council financial targets to the best of our ability. They are targets, and so in some cases we're above or below the target, but those are the metrics that we use to keep the utility financially stable. We have rates in place that encourage conservation, so you'll often hear those referred to as tiered rates, where the more water that you use, the higher your cost per gallon becomes. And again, that's to encourage conservation. And then we also look at the different characteristics of different kinds of customers, for example, commercial customers versus residential customers, and how those different types of customers impact rates differently. I did want to say at this point, though, that the whole thing, all of that analysis is what I call a zero-sum game, meaning the rates are just set to recover the costs of the utility. There's no profit involved. It's just basically the rates being designed to cover the costs. The city of Glendale in particular, for account growth, we're seeing very little. Most of the growth is in the far west areas, which are not the city's utilities. So we do see some growth in demand, and in the number of customers. You can see there we've assumed it will be 1% for the first 2 years, and then after that it slows to 0.75 and 0.5%. And this is consistent with what we've been seeing over the last few years.
Mayor, do those projections take into account the residential growth in the Yucca District, the Westgate area?
Mayor, members of council, yes, they do.
Okay.
We also look at the demand for water, and we look at the demand for water under normal weather, meaning we don't want to look at the demand during a drought situation or a very dry situation. We look at it at the trend over a longer period of time and try to look at how much do customers use when weather is more normal. Listed there below you that on the expenses side, you can see the various metrics that we've used to and assumptions we've used on how the expenses will grow. Wages and overtime at 2.5%. Taxes and benefits are growing slightly faster. The cost of raw water is growing at a rate of about 4%. Chemicals at 3.5, and that's over the 5-year period. They actually have jumped here this year sort of dramatically, so we're keeping an eye on that. We also have the cost to treat wastewater at the 91st Avenue plant, and our projection is that that'll continue to grow at a rate of about 4% per year. Now, a lot of what is driving the need for rate review and the recommendations that staff is going to make is the capital plan for water. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Johnson, and he's going to review that with you.
Thank you, Ms. Rios. Mayor, Council, if I could indulge you a little bit here, I'd like to move to slide number 8. Then we'll come back to slides 6 and 7. And I'd like to provide a little background. As you recall, in 2017, we presented our CIP to the City Council that addressed a number of projects that we had a backlog due to the downturn at that time, and the fact that we were not doing any rate increases for 7 years. The projects were to address deferred maintenance, redundancy, reliability, and resiliency. And with the support of City Council and the management, the City Council approved 4 years out of 5 for the rate adjustment plan, and was approved through FY21 to provide the increased revenue to support the project costs. One of the things that I mentioned here was resiliency, redundancy, and reliability. I'd like to kind of expand that conversation a little bit. We call it the 3 R's here. Every CIP that we've ever been presented takes into account these 3 R's, and basically there are customer service objectives, because we have to supply services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we have to be ready for anything that comes at us, and the citizens have the right to expect that when they turn on the tap, the water's going to be there. So what I like to do here is kind of explain our rationale and some of the major areas in the Water Services Department on the 3 R's. First of all, let's start off with our water portfolio. Our water portfolio is got built-in redundancy and reliability, and there is, if Mother Nature helps us out, we've got resiliency. For instance, we've got the Salt and Verde River surface water drainage. We've got the Colorado River, which is the CAP. We have our wells, and we have our reclaimed water recharge that we have 4 years of water stored underground. No one of these sources here can supply the city's needs on its own. It has to rely on all the needs, and we've got one of the strongest portfolios in the state of Arizona, specifically here in the valley, and some of our sister cities don't have one as strong as ours. And I'm going back to the resilient part. The Colorado River, as we all know, has been in a drought for going on 22 years now, and it's stressed. But the state of Arizona and the city of Glendale has been prepared. We've got a drought management plan, and the state's got the drought contingency plan, so we will be keeping a close eye on that. The next up is our plants. We've got 4 water treatment plants, and redundancy is key here to make sure that the water gets to the tap 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No one water plant can satisfy the needs of the city. It takes all 4 water plants. The 2 of our water plants are on the Salt River and the Verde River, and then the one other plant is on the CAP, and the other plant is dealing with is connected to a well structure, and it's called our ion exchange facility. Next up would be our wastewater plants. Now, the way I like to focus on the wastewater plants is reliability. We've got the Arrowhead Ranch Water Reclamation Facility. We just finished $30 million of upgrading that plant and getting it online. And the purpose of that upgrade was to make it as reliable as possible, because that's what we call an end-of-line plant, and it cannot be turned off. So it drains everything north of Bell Road, and it sets over there at 83rd Avenue and the 101. Now, the West Area Water Reclamation Facility at the airport is also in line, and it drains everything south of Bell Road. But the interesting feature for West Area is it's got a redundant partner in the SHROG, the 91st Avenue Wastewater Treatment Plant, and that we can, if we have to do something planned, or if we have an emergency at West Area, we can divert all of the flow to the 91st Avenue Wastewater Treatment Plant and take care of the emergency. Next up is our pipes in the ground. So our collection system, our sewer system, and our water system. The sewer system and the collections has to be very reliable also, because we don't have a lot of redundant sewers to carry this, to go from one point to another. So, but we do have access for inspection. So we have our manholes, and we are TVing, and we have all of our appropriate equipment to keep up with the status of the sewer, and we prioritize the sewer, and then our CIP has projects listed accordingly. On the distribution system now, they're always under pressure, and they always have water in them, so they're harder to inspect and test. So we use age and the break history on our lines to help guide us as to where we go. Plus, we have consultants that help us with master plan on evaluation our distribution system. And last, and one of the most important items, is our water zones. We have 4 water zones that we use to control the pressure in the city and water availability. The first 2, 1, 2, and 4 are down here in the southern sector. Basically, it covers the lower part of the L, and it goes up close to Bell Road. Those are zones 1, 2, and 4, and those have redundant backup. So we have enough capacity in Cholla with wells and to provide them the water they need. Even if we have a plant, if Cholla happens to go down for some reason, we've got wells to back it up. Also, the Pyramid Peak plant also brings water down south and can get into the lower part of the city if it's needed. So there is redundant flow for the zones 1, 2, and 4. But for zone 3 does not have a redundant source, a permanent redundant source, and that's what we've been working on now for 2 years. And the capital plans that you've been approving, and there is additional effort in this particular proposed CIP, is to bring redundant flow to zone 3. And that is the Cholla district, and we have plans for putting 2 wells in the area to support their needs. Also, we're going to do interconnects. I've been having a very good relationship with the city of Phoenix and the city of Peoria, so we can run interconnects and connect their system to ours on the eastern side of the Arrowhead area, on the western side of the Arrowhead area, and then we're going to put in 2 wells. And once we get, and those are in the CIP, and once we get those installed, we'll be in good shape for any emergency that comes down with the Pyramid Peak plant or on the CAP canal. And one last thing I said we were working on for 2 years is we have a booster station working up there at 67th and Deer Valley, and we've invested in there, and that will be our own internal emergency flow for Zone 3. If we need it, we've already practiced the valving turning and the circulation, and this fall we will do another test on it, so we all can rest assured that we're going to work very hard not to have to go on TV and say that that zone is out of water. All right, now to go back to what Ms. Rios was talking about on the CIP. The CIP is a rate driver, and it okay, well, yeah, thank you, Ms. Rios. I got engrossed in what I was wanting to tell you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what the 3 Rs does for us and what the CIP, what you've allowed for us to have done in CIP. This is just a sampling. I showed you some of these when we talked about the CIP a few weeks ago, but just going from left to right on here, we've got, talking about the manholes I was talking about, we had a manhole that needed repair and rehabilitation, and the one picture below it shows the finished manhole. The water line that you can see in the middle is an indication we want to minimize those breaks, but the breaks will happen. We've had very minimal breaks. We've not had any large catastrophic breaks, so we're looking good. And one part of that is the gentleman at the bottom part of the picture. We're putting in new water lines. So we have distribution system improvements that's going on as part of the CIP. And then on the right-hand side, we have the wells. We have a series of wells. We have 16 wells in the city. And the picture at the top is a casing that goes down in the well that the water comes up through. And when we talk about deferred maintenance, it's important that we are able to be timely on our deferred maintenance, send cameras down these wells, and look and see if we have situations like this so we can repair them as soon as possible. And the way to repair this is putting a sleeve inside this casing. So the CIP for, the proposed CIP for the systems or their piping and wells is sitting for this year is about $123 million. Next up is our plants. Again, I talked about the importance of the plants and getting them rehabbed, because without the plants, I can't get the water to the citizens. The upper left-hand corner is a Cholla water treatment plant. This is a backwash basin that was recently rehabilitated. The lower picture shows the condition it was in before, and the upper picture shows it completely rehabilitated. On the right-hand side, upper right, is the West Area Water Reclamation Facility inlet pipe where the wastewater comes into the plant, and the left was the corroded vaults that the water ran through, and then to the right is the rehabilitated vaults after the repair. And from a redundancy perspective, the lower left-hand corner is Cholla Water Treatment Plant. We just, part of the project is the purchase of a large standby generator to provide redundant electrical power for the plant. Are there any questions so far? Okay, going back to the slide 8. As we mentioned, the CIP is basically it's the driver for the rates. This year's 10-year program is $395 million, and the first 5 years that's $242 million. It does address the deferred maintenance that we talked about, and of course, keeping up with our deferred maintenance minimizes the chances of costly emergency repairs. We've got updated technologies, and what I mean by that is all of our system in the operations for the plants, it's basically run by what they call SCADA. We've heard this before, and it's a computer program that runs the plants and has all the set points and everything. So we've upgraded that. We've implemented our new asset management system, which helps us keep up with our maintenance requirements. And we also have installed technology to help us optimize our chemical use. And we have some electrical equipment that's also state-of-the-art that's helped us also hold down our energy costs. And that's all built in as part of our improvements to the inefficiencies. And last on this item here is the assumed debt issuance. So this, for the first 5 years, we're assuming $122 million in bond sales over the next 5 years. This slide I want to go over with you. I think it's a very good picture of what you were wanting to achieve in 2018 and what we've been able to accomplish, and how to move forward here. As you all know, we had a backlog. We had a program. We we had lots of discussions in 2017 about the rates, and we had a higher rate. We came in, we had several discussions. The rate came down to what we settled on at 6.5 and 5.5, and we proceeded to build the program and accomplish the cash flows that you see. So these are cash flow bars. That indicates how much money that's been spent from 2018 to 2021. I'm leaving out the previous years because the 2018 forward is the 5-year program we talked to you about. We are right where we had planned to be. One of the other important items during our discussions was when are we going to come down off of this? We want to start heading down, and we want to start getting towards a more regular inflationary type rate increase. So what this does is we're for FY22, we're coming down off of the top. We're moving in the right direction as everybody would hope we would, and then we're going to be coming down and transitioning into a more of a flat rate in the area of inflation. So that's what I wanted to go over with this slide to show you that. You ready?
Thank you, Mayor. This question I think is probably for Ms. Rios. But so on the capital outlay slide, basically starting in 2018, 2019, let's just say we're at about actual cash flow of about 40, somewhere between 40 and 50 million, whatever that graph ends. And now we're at 75, somewhere between 70 and 80 million. That's all based on just rates. Seems like a lot more cash flow than would be accumulated by just the rate increases. But the growth, we were told, was only 1%. So I'm just confused how the cash flow can increase, or maybe that is what it is. It's all based on rate.
Mayor, members of the Councilmember Tomachoff, we did in fiscal year 2021 issue about $30 million in debt. We recently completed that transaction. Let me give you some information about it. I believe Mr. Stoddard may have sent out an announcement about it. It occurred last week. It was about $30 million. It was a very favorable transaction. The interest cost on it was less than 2%. But yes, we did issue debt this year.
Okay.
And we have plans to issue debt for the next 5 years.
Vice Mayor, if I could.
Go ahead.
Okay, then let's just look at 2018 to 2019 and 2020. That sliding increase is based solely on rates?
Mayor, members of the council, because we had slowed down the capital program, and you see it being so low in 15 and 16 and 17, the utility had deferred maintenance and slowed down, and so they had some cash accumulated. Our goal was to spend down the available cash first until they get to the point where they needed to borrow, and then this was the first year, and this is the first year that they needed to borrow.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Vice
Yeah,
Mayor?
go ahead.
Thank you. Just so that I'm clear on this chart that's titled Capital Outlay, that's not, so then it says cash flow and projected cash flow. So this isn't the revenues for the operation. This is how much money, of the money we have, how much money we're actually spending on the capital projects that it takes to take care of our deferred maintenance and then continue maintaining our system and not deferring maintenance going forward.
Vice Mayor, members of the council, that's correct. There was a catch-up, and so the bars in gray, the reason why it says actual cash flow, that's the actual expenditures for each of those years. We're not quite through 2021, but that's the actual expenditures, and then the orangish bars are the projected budgeted cash flows and budgeted capital for the remainder of the plan.
So if we were to overlay revenues on this chart, would that make any sense? You know, like, here's how much we're bringing in.
By Mayor, members of the council, when we build the rate model, we do that. We look at the revenues, we look at the operating expenses, we look at the capital expenses, and also the debt service. So actually, to see a full picture of it, you'd have to have all those elements. That's what we generally do when we give you the forecast in the January timeframe. But we do that and we have it modeled. This is just one element.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so as we mentioned at the beginning, or I did at the beginning of this presentation, we have council has set these targets for the utility based on recommendations from both RBC, our rate advisors, and our financial advisors and our rate consultant. And they are that working capital will be 50% of the operating expenses, that our days cash on hand, we have a target of 250 days, but a minimum of 180. We have a debt service coverage ratio, which is the amount of cash available to spend after covering all of your expenses to apply towards your debt, of 1.85. We have a minimum of 1.2, which is part of our bond covenants. If it falls below 4.2, you're subject to having your bonds all be due and payable. We don't want to get to there, so that's our very minimum. And the result of that, again, is a AA credit rating for the utility. Why that's important is something I just said a couple minutes ago in response to Councilmember Tomolchoff's question, and that is that it gives us a favorable borrowing rate. Rates are at historic lows, and as I said, the most recent financing for the water utility, we were able to get a rate just under 2%. Back in January, when we did look at the forecast, and this is just kind of a snapshot, a high-level snapshot of it, we could see that as we go along, we were we were meeting our working capital target in the early years, but you start to not be able to meet it at fiscal year 24. And again, this is a baseline if we were not going to do any rate increases. So already in January, we knew that beyond these first couple of years, it's not a sustainable model for the utility without any type of increase. Oh, nope. Yeah, no, one more. Okay, thank you. And so what do you do about that? Well, what the rate consultant has come up with here are basically two options. So on the left, you have option one, and option one is basically a continuation of the last rate study. So when we did this a couple of years ago, we told council that likely in the 5th year, at that time we were doing a 5-year rate study, and we said that likely in the 5th year you would need a 6.5% increase in water, a 5.5% increase in sewer for a sort of a combined rate of 6%. If you do that, then in fiscal year 23 and beyond, you get to what council asked us and what the public asked us when we did the public outreach at that time. You get down to more of a generally inflationary type of increase every year below 3%, so right at 2.9%. Under option two, because we know from the public outreach from the last time, we know that people like to have smaller, more frequent rate increases than have large rate increases. There is an option here that we've come up with where we smooth that out, and instead of doing a 6.5% and 5.5% in the first year, we can do a 4.3% increase for water, a lower 3% increase on sewer for kind of a combined 3.7% increase. So I'm going to go to the next slide because percent of what is kind of, difficult when you are just looking at percentages out of context. So what this would mean to a monthly bill for a user that is using 9,000 gallons of water a month, and that's our average user. The average user across our entire system uses about 9,000 gallons of water a month. And for that user under option one, in the first year, you would see an increase of $4.71 a month, but then you'll see these smaller increases in the neighborhood of $2 to $2.50 a month. Under option two, again, for this average user using 9,000 gallons of water a month, Again, you see it being smoothed out. It's a little less in the first year, right? Because you're not doing 6%, you're doing a smaller amount. And then you can do, but you have to do slightly larger amounts the rest of the years. Now, the important thing I think to note about this is either option gets you to the same, about the same place at the end of the 5-year period. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it gets you to around the same place, which is what is needed to have the utility be sustainable.
Thank you, Mayor. So when I do the math, I get, on option 1, I get over 5 years a 17.6% increase. And when I do the math on option 2, I get an 18.5% increase, so the difference is about 1%. So why wouldn't the option 2 be 3.5 rather than 3.7 to adjust for that extra percent? Or is the idea to generate more under option 2?
Mayor, members of the council, they're very close in terms of the dollar amounts. I know when you look at percentages, it seems different. I'm going to show you a little bit about how it is on a bill here in a second. But that has to do with the time value of money, right? So if you get money sooner and you're earning interest on it and you do that larger increase at the beginning, then the other increases can be smaller. But when you smooth it out because of the time value of money, you end up having to have a little bit higher increase over the 5-year period. Having money sooner makes it more valuable than having money later.
Mayor, if I could, I understand that, but I also know that, I mean, we don't have the capacity to do all of the work all at once anyway, so we wouldn't need all of the money all at once, right? I mean, that's why we don't bond for, we wouldn't bond for the $122 million in year 1 because we don't have the capacity to do all the work in year 1. Even though maybe their interest rates are favorable right now, we wouldn't, I don't know that it would be fiscally responsible to go out for a bond for all the money that we don't need, over the course of the 5 years in year 1. So, I know it's complicated, but I don't know that we would need all of the money on a 6% raise in the first year, that we would be able to actually do that amount of extra CIP work.
So, Mayor, members of the council, again, if you were to do option 1, then it allows you in the earlier year to borrow slightly less money. Over the long haul, over the entire 5-year period, you're going to have to borrow the same, but you can borrow less in the first year and then a little more in each of the subsequent years. So it is complicated, but that's kind of how it would work, is that because you generated more in the first year, you could smooth out also your debts and not borrow quite as much the first part of the plan.
Mayor, okay, I understand that, except for in the beginning, we have more certainty about rates than we do on the back end. I mean, in 5 years or 4 years or 3 years, I mean, we just bonded at 2%. I mean, that is likely to increase. So, I mean, I know it's a balancing and trying to figure it all out, but we have a lot more certainty about what our cost is to borrow now than we do in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So does that come into consideration as the consultant look at that?
Mayor, members of the council, yes. As time goes on, we have less certainty and we have a larger assumption about what our borrowing costs will be. We know rates now are historically low, so in any debt that we issue we'll say in the next 12 months, we're going to have a slightly lower rate than we would in, say, year 5. And that's all taken into consideration during the modeling.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to ask you a question. Before we got that AA rating, say, 10 years ago, do you, off the top of your head, remember what our rating was and what we would have paid on the same interest 10 years ago compared to today?
Mayor, members of the council, I do not know off the top of my head what the rating history was for the utility. I can find out for you, and I can also find out for you what they paid, but the amount of interest they pay isn't only a function of their rating, it's also a function of the market. So it's a little hard to compare apples to oranges when you're going back over time with a different market.
And I do understand that. I do know the interest was higher, but I also know that the bond rating was less.
That's correct.
And so it was sort of a double whammy at that point.
Mayor, that's correct.
Right. So do you have an estimate with this AA rating with what you're asking for now, what our savings would be to our citizens as far as the AA rating, what that's actually saving in dollars today.
Mayor, members of the council, I don't have that off the top of my head. What I can tell you, however, is that since we've had changes in our ratings, we've gone back and refinanced also those older bonds and been able to garner savings from that as well. I just don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'd be happy to look for them and get them to you.
All right. Okay, so are you looking for a consensus right now, or you have some more things you want to talk about?
I have some more things if you don't mind. All right, so this slide is simply meant to tell you that under either option 1 or option 2, so you see them laying there, option 1, option 2 is underneath it for each of those financial targets, that you can meet your financial targets under either option. I did want to point out that if you look at the days cash on hand, again, we said the target was 250. We measure that on the absolutely worst possible day, and so it doesn't seem to meet its target, but on average it does meet its target because the last day of the year is when we pay debt service for the whole year. So, so it's just an anomaly that measuring it on that day makes it kind of look low. What we get frequently asked about when we're talking about rates and rate options is how we compare to the other cities. So this is a graphic kind of showing you how we compare. Again, you can see on there either option 1 or option 2 for this average customer using about 9,000 gallons a month. We're sort of in the middle there, and you can see how it compares to our current rate, which is the 5th one from the right. We also wanted to show you what this looks like because for a user using less water, the impact is even smaller. Under option 1, the increase would be about $2.96 a month, and under option 2 in the first year it would be $1.86. These lower type of water users are small families, maybe 1 to 2 in a family or an apartment or a condominium or something like that. I did also want to mention that for those customers that are having difficulty paying their bill, we have several programs available to them. If you're a low-income family, the water department, at the direction of council, has set aside about $50,000 a year to help people with their water bills. In addition to that, through the U.S. Treasury, we have rental assistance program that helps pay for renters' water, sewer, and trash bill, and also their rent. We've been awarded quite a lot of money under that program. We set aside, or the council did, $253,000 in CDBG money to help homeowners who are having trouble with their bill. And the state has recently received almost $24 million through the Department of Economic Security that will help people with a low-income water assistance program. I just got this number today. We don't know how much of that will be allocated to Glendale, but the point of that is that there are ways to help people who need help with their water bills. We wanted to show you what it looks like for a higher level water user, and of course the impact is going to be more. So if you're a commercial water customer using 20,000 gallons a month, under option 1, your bill would go up about $13.51 a month, and under option 2, about $8.98 a month. And then the last comparison we're giving you is for a sprinkler bill, and by a sprinkler bill we mean it doesn't have any sewer component, it's water only, typically a sprinkler or a landscaping type of system. This is a high-level user, again, water only at about 90,000 gallons a month. And for option 1, their bill would go up $18.62, and for option 2, it would go up $27.56 a month. So the question you may be asking, I think, or I ask, which I think is kind of interesting, is for those dollars, what do you get? And we wanted to tell, for the council and the members of the public, how you compare the value of water to the value of other things. So the cost per day for that average residential user of water is about $2.57. Under option 1, it would go up by about 15 cents a day, and under option 2, about 10 cents. Water is still a very good value. You can fill your bathtub for 11 cents. If you were to try it instead with these bottles of water to fill your bathtub, it would cost you $35.60, and that's for this lowest price of bottled water. You can do a load of laundry, about 90,000 gallons, for 24 cents, and it's still less than $100 to fill your swimming pool.
Mayor, council, if I may, one more item here. I asked when I teach Glendale University, I asked the students how many times they think they can fill this bottle of water up for $1 out of their tap. It takes several iterations of guessing to get it done, but it's just under 4,000 times you can fill this up out of your tap for $1. They have a hard time understanding that, but that kind of gives them, a very good idea about the value of the water.
And what you get for that for that low price, I believe, which it's relatively low, is the raw water and the additional capacity that we need to maintain that system. All the water is treated and clean water, and it pays for the running of the plants, including the personnel, electricity, chemicals, and all of the maintenance. It pays for the system to deliver the water, which is all the water mains and the meters, and also hydrants and fire protection. It assures that that water is of very high quality, and it is also assures that your used water, your wastewater, is collected and treated and recharged into the ground. And this occurs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, uninterruptedly, and with multiple supplies of water and the ability to treat it, as Mr. Johnson spoke about earlier. We did take these options and discuss them quite in depth with the Citizens Utilities Advisory Commission, and these are the recommendations that they asked us to bring forward to you. They were in support of the financial plan, again, understanding that the ultimate decision is up to the council. And they preferred there was quite a robust discussion, actually, but they preferred option 2 over option 1. They liked the idea of smoothing that increase out. But there was quite a bit of discussion. Some wanted to bite the bullet and just get it over with and get down to the more of the 3% kind of range. I did also want to mention that there was some discussion there. They liked the idea of a plan for 5 years because, particularly for the HOAs, it gives them more predictability when they're budgeting. They would know now what the increases were going to be over time instead of trying to react to an increase, that's 2 years from now or 3 years from now, unknown. So because they want to be able to set their own rates for their HOAs, for example, they preferred the 5-year plan.
Thank you, Mayor. Were they presented with anything but a 5-year plan?
Mayor, members of the council, they discussed the number of years of the plan. They were presented with basically the same information you're being presented.
Mayor, if I could, it's my understanding that they were presented with 2 5-year plans. So obviously they would prefer a 5-year plan because both of their options were a 5-year plan. So what I'm asking is, were they presented with any other option other than a 5-year plan?
Again, Mayor, members of the council, they were presented with this same information, understanding that you could do 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and they preferred the 5 years because of the predictability for their future.
Mayor, as I recall, it was right about 2 years ago in June. that we did our last rate increase, and there hadn't been a rate increase in like 10 years, and which meant that we had to this council had to bite the bullet and present a fairly large rate increase. And the council decided at that time that we wanted to evaluate our rates every 2 years. And I don't know why, was the Utility Advisory Committee told that the council has said they want to adopt rates every 2 years? And I don't know why we're looking, it's fine to look down the road and see, you know, where it looks like we're headed, but this council said we want to do it every 2 years. I don't know why it sounds like we're being asked to adopt a 5-year plan instead of a 2-year plan. Now, I would suggest we adopt rates for 2 years based on these 5-year projections, but I think that the council should be evaluating these every 2 years so that we continue to stay with the most modest rate increases possible, and that the burden of raising rates is spread equally among the members of the council regardless of their re-election cycle. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions for you. One, by having a 5-year plan, what does that do as far as bonding?
Mayor, members of the council, whenever we go out to sell bonds, we do calls with the bond rating agencies, and one of the questions that they always ask us is, what is the plan for future rate increases? And again, that goes back to what I showed you when I kind of showed you the January forecast, because they can also see that without rate increases, it's not really a sustainable model. So they always ask the question, what is the council's appetite for for rate increases? If we know that council has already adopted, we'll say in this case, for example, 2 years, then we give them that information. If we know that there's a rate study going on, we tell them we're in the middle of a rate study, which is what we did several weeks ago when we talked to them, and but that in the past, the council has been open to making those increases, understanding it was necessary to maintain the utility. It would be favorable if you had the rate increases already in place, because then the answer to the question when they ask what's council's appetite or what is their plan for rate increases, we could say they've already adopted rate increases for the next 5 years.
Okay, and then with that said, now our average inflation rate is up pretty close to 3%, some years a little more, some a little bit less, but we're sort of staying within those standards. And I guess the argument for whether it's an election or not election, this isn't something that we decide to do today and then it happens. This is a process that's going to take several months. Is that correct?
Mayor, members of the council, that's correct. On the last slide, we kind of have the targeted dates for this, but at this point, what we're looking for is a consensus to move forward with either of the options and what council's pleasure is. And then we would go and do public outreach. Do you want to turn to that slide, Craig? Not the last one with the dates. The last one. We'd start the public outreach process, and then the next step for the council is on August 10th to adopt a notice of intent to increase rates. At any time, council can pull back or make a different decision up until the point that they actually vote on the rates, which we have planned now for October 26th, and then those rates could go into effect on January 1st of 2022. So you do have time, I think, was the answer to your question, Mayor.
Okay, and then my final question right now. If we adopted this and said, yeah, we want to do this 5-year plan, and then we find out 2.5 years from now that something major pops up that we just flat weren't expecting, maybe CAP water's tripled in price or something like that, we can still change and alter what we have in currently being used. Is that correct?
Mayor, members of the council, that's correct. As long as you follow the process again, which is kind of outlined here, and do a new notice of intent and all of those legal requirements, you can change them at any time.
Okay, all right, good.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple things. As I recall, this was brought to us in late 2016, probably 2017, whenever we first started talking about we need to address our rates. And I don't have any problem, and I appreciate the work that Water Services has done. They've done a lot of work, important things that we need to do. So I don't have a problem addressing our rates. But when we were first presented with this, we were presented with a 5-year plan. And I thought we set the policy that we had a 5-year plan, but we were going to assess the plan in 2 years. And then if we needed to make other adjustments, that we'd make adjustments at 2-year increments to our rates. So I don't know why that changed. I thought that was what our policy was, is that we were going to look at this every 2 years, especially with the drought conditions that we're in. There's, a real possibility that our cost of water could increase and things that could increase, and that I don't understand the reasoning why we wouldn't want to look in 2 years. And we've got a 5-year plan, but, we may need to make some adjustments to it in 2 years. We don't know that. So I just don't know how we got to here that we're being asked to approve a 5-year plan with the variables, especially with the cost of water. I mean, there's a real possibility, and I know Councilmember Turner's on AMWA, our representative. I think he's the chairman of AMWA now. I'm not positive, but there's a lot of influx right now with our water conditions here in Arizona. It doesn't look like the drought's going to be ending anytime soon, where we may be paying more for water, and that would probably have an effect on this. So that's one thing. I don't think we should be approving a rate increase for 5 years. We did 2 years at a time, and we still had a AA rating. We just did bond. We just got a 2%. We just went out for bond at 2%. So obviously, the situation that how we've been doing this hasn't affected our ability to borrow at a really good rate. My second thing is that, and I know that they're aware this is coming from me, is that I had asked, because we have this around $60 million in American recovery money. I had asked publicly to at least show us what the numbers look like if we were to repay the enterprise fund. I believe we now still, and it's not all to water services, some of it was for landfill, but we still owe $38 million to the enterprise fund for the $50 million that was used to pay the NHL to run the hockey team, 2 years at $25 million a year. I have no idea whether there would be a consensus of the council to use that money for this, but I feel like we should be able to know what that looks like before we decide that we're not going to do that. So I'm not willing to move forward on this at all today because I had asked for that information. I think the council should have that information before we make a commitment. Like I said, I have no idea whether there's a consensus to actually do that with the money or not, but we don't know what it would look like by paying the money back, what the performance look like going forward if the money is repaid. Even maybe just the council may decide we only want to pay back the water services and still finance the rest of the money that's owed to the enterprise fund. But, this is a rare opportunity. We're not going to have an opportunity to do this again where we can just literally pay the money back. So I'm asking for a consensus from the council for us to at least have them bring us back what that would look like. What does this pro forma look like with that money infused before we make a decision? So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to kind of go in one other direction real quick, because some of the residents that I've spoken with are concerned that the water rate increases are going to development far out west, for example, along the 303. And so I'd like you to clarify for us exactly where these funds will and will not be used for any kind of increase that we do.
Mayor, members of the council, I can answer that question. These are, the water utility operates only east of 115th Avenue. So all of the development that is occurring in the far west part of the city, including along the 303, is with private utility companies, the major one being EPCOR.
Would it be accurate to state that because of that policy, then we are literally would be much more in debt if we were trying to input that infrastructure in the far west valley than we are with what we're doing east of 115.
Mayor, members of the council, yes, it would absolutely be much more expensive if we were having to do that.
Okay, I want to address a little bit, the two options. I feel that the increases that we're asking for, and for what we're asking for, are reasonable. I prefer option 2 over option 1, but I do understand the concern of the 5-year plan. However, when we were looking at this before, we were looking at a 5-year plan that had pretty hefty increases every single year, 6 and 7%, as I recall. And we said, we're not willing to say we're going to do those hefty increases every year. We want to do it every couple of years. And so we did. But now I think we're at a different stage. We're now saying we're now kind of caught up. Do we expect increased costs? Well, I think we are. Do we want to kind of account for that now? And I think we should. I think it's our responsibility financially to look at where we're at financially with our services, and if we have a long-term strategy to ensure that they will continue at their levels or better than we are today. And so given that, I feel like what has been presented, it's a much better plan than I was thinking would come to us when we discussed this rate study. I think they're very reasonable. I think the percentage increases are very reasonable. If indeed we have issues that come up and then we have a much greater need, then we need to bring it back and we need to discuss that. But I think we're limiting ourselves by saying these lower rates. I think we're kind of trying to say, okay, we're going to limit the growth in these areas to the 3% or 3.5% based on what we think inflation will be. Now, it could be that something happens dramatically and we do need to increase those higher, but then we're going to have another discussion. And we're going to have to talk about where we're going to go with those. And so that's why I think it is reasonable and prudent for us today to move this forward. I agree with the recommendation from the commission, and I would support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I guess to the point of why it's important that we only adopt rates 2 years at a time is because had we adopted rates for 5 years a few years ago, we wouldn't be looking at lower numbers now that we're looking at. And we don't know that in the next 5 years that these projections will continue on track. But if we say, yeah, we'll adopt these rates for the next 5 years, something catastrophic would have to happen, I think, for rates to come back for council review anytime between now and 5 years. And then the question could be brought to us, this council, those of us here or some other group of members is saying, oh, by the way, now we need to raise them more because the projections didn't hold and expenses for whatever reason, cost of water or cost of labor or cost of chemicals or repairs that we have to make have changed. And I just think it best serves our residents that we look at these rates every 2 years. And that's what we said we were going to do, and I think it was a wise decision then. I think it'll be a wise decision now. And I think that if staff is presenting to our advisory groups for their recommendations to council, that if council has taken a position on something, that the advisory group ought to know that. And if they still want to make a recommendation that council change its position, that's fine. But they should know that the council has a position. And I'm not sure that occurred. And I'm also disappointed because it sounds to me like Councilmember Tomachoff asked for some very reasonable information to help her make a decision here. And it bothers me that any of us wouldn't get the information from staff that we've requested. I may or may not agree with her concern and what she may or may want to propose once she has that information. But until she has that information, until we have that information, we don't know what we're going to decide. And I think it's unfair to council members not to provide them the information they need to be able to make these decisions. And it disappoints me that it seems to have happened there. For residents that may be watching, 115th Avenue approximates the entrance to our landfill. So if it's east of the entrance to the landfill, it's the part of the system that we talk about with our rates, our repairs, our investment, and all of that. But for all of that construction, all that development that's happening west of the landfill, that is handled through EPCOR and or other water service providers, and that's not something that impacts your water rates. All for the moment, Mayor.
Mayor, members of the council, just a couple quick comments. First of all, staff did go back and look at the discussion with the city council back when we adopted the previous 2-year rate increase, and the council did not ever adopt a formal policy. We looked at that very hard and very clear. There was certainly discussion about the advantages of going to a 2-year rate study, but the council has not adopted a formal policy. You're certainly welcome, to do that. But so our job was then to say, all right, from just a financial management at this, we've identified the capital needs, and we've heard the council be pretty consistent with the need to make improvements in the system. We recommended, our recommendation is a 5-year for one basic reason, is that as in working with our bond counsel, we believe that if you have predictability in the 5-year rate increases, it'll be more favorable when we go out to sell debt. Now, we don't know what that means. We just know that our bond counsel says it will be viewed upon more favorably. So we saw it in that vein that we would, if we can do a 5-year rate study, but it's a policy issue, and certainly if the council doesn't want to go that route and wants to adopt a 2-year window, we'll manage that and we'll move forward with it. But regarding Councilmember Tomachoff's request, and maybe we interpreted that incorrectly, but I know you'd mentioned the ARPA funds about being able to use some of the second round of ARPA funding for paying down the debt. Since we've already allocated, the first round has already been, by council policy, has already been directed. So it's about the second level of ARPA funding. And right now, we're still, like almost every other city, trying to see how we're even going to be able to use some of that ARPA funding because it's a lot more restricted. So if the question is, we could certainly give you a really quick analysis in a few days. If the policy is to use general fund reserve to pay back the loan, but if it's regarding what would be the impact of using ARPA funds, we're not sure we can yet. And so that was the challenge why we haven't been able, Councilmember Tomachoff, to get you the information. So we're still trying to figure out, is there a mechanism that we could do that with? But we can certainly model I think it's roughly 13 million, Vicki, is that correct?
Yes.
That is owed the water. We can certainly model that in terms of the impact, but if we can't use ARPA funds, then it would either be, reserves or some other mechanism.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe it's quite clear that ARPA funds are eligible for infrastructure, and I would think this would be considered infrastructure. And I mean, nobody, in fact, when we went through the pre-presentation, it was like, oh, we forgot. That's what I was told, is that we forgot. It wasn't that we couldn't do it or didn't know how to do it or we weren't sure about ARPA or whatever. It was, we forgot. So I think the council should know what this looks like with that infusion of the 13 million, whatever the amount that's still owed water services. Whether they agree or disagree with it, we don't even know what it looks like by paying the money back. So, and as far as the 5-year plan, I mean, you just said, we were able to go out for bond for $30 million at 2%. We have a AA rating. We have a 5-year plan. I mean, we've already come up with a 5-year plan. All we're saying is, why wouldn't we adopt a rate increase for 2 years based on the 5-year plan, and then we come back in 2 years, literally, there wouldn't be a whole lot of work to do to say if we need to make any adjustments to it, due to costs of, you know, personnel, whatever, and then we don't need to make any adjustments. Obviously, this council has shown that we understand that we need to do rate adjustments, and we're willing to do that. But obviously, we did not adopt a formal policy, but my point is we were presented with a 5-year plan, and we said we wanted to do this. I went back and read the minutes. I know exactly what was said. That we said we wanted to do this in 2-year increments, that we didn't want to commit to more than a 2-year rate increase at a time. And it was clearly where the council was. Now, whether we didn't have the foresight to, and I'll take the blame for that myself, to actually adopt a formal policy, but it was clear that we wanted to be able to look at this every 2 years. So I'm not willing to support more than a 2-year rate increase, and I'm not even willing to do that without having a look at what this looks like with reassess the performer with that infusion of cash, what it would look like. So that's where I'm at today. Thank you.
Yeah, we're kind of all over on the water rates. I'm not sure. I don't know. Let's go back in the history of Glendale, a few years that we've been serving together. We're fortunate enough to save millions and millions of dollars, what this council has done with all of our bonds by smart moves the council made. And if it's beneficial for a 5-year plan with the bond companies, that works to the betterment of Glendale, then I'm in favor of it. I know, Vicki, you were asked a question about some of the money. Maybe we can get a report from you, all the millions we saved by refinancing former bonds, and I'm sure it's quite a large number. We've been very successful, and I think the citizens appreciate it. I know they like the work being done in the neighborhoods, and Glendale is, we got a lot of wonderful things happening. We have our parks being rebuilt, our streets are being refurbished, things are going great, and I know we have to maintain our infrastructure for our utilities. And I love the example of this water, you know, on what it costs. I drink tap water. I don't know why anybody buys bottled water. And now I found out I'm saving a whole lot of money by drinking tap water. And I think we offer a great value to our citizens. And that's getting the best bond rating of having a 5-year plan to help. So I'm in favor of it. Thanks, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. Everyone here knows me very well, enough to know that I've not given my approval for any rate increases. And that's because the demographics of my community. But our community has its fair share of infrastructure needs, because they're probably the oldest. So if they go down, then we have some catastrophic issues with lack of water and sewer. With that said, I'll pause on that and say thank you for the presentation. What I don't like is, and you did use a different model, but the 9,000-gallon model, that isn't reality. That's a 1,500 square foot home, probably going to be the model, but no, that's much higher than that. So those who are watching, you don't use 9,000 gallons of water. People use much more than that, so it'll impact you. I don't know if significantly, but it'll impact you. I'm going to give my consensus. We still have to vote on this, but I'm going to give my consensus today for the increase using the plan that the commission put forth. But my question is, I keep hearing the 2 years. Can't we just implement that now? I'll ask the city managers, I keep hearing the 2 years, that we need to be benchmarking this every 2 years. Can't that just start after this?
Mayor, members of the council.
I'm a little confused.
We have to go through this formal process that we're talking about up here, because per state statute, we have to do this notification of intent, and it has to be 60 days and all this. But maybe more to your question, yes, you can do only 2 years of it. We would have to follow this process again in 2 years. Is that more or less answer your question?
I just was confused on the 2 years. Why we couldn't implement that at any point in time the council wants to.
Mayor, members of the council, you can.
You can, okay. That's it, Mayor, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I look at it maybe different than a lot of folks. To me, it's an insurance policy. It's a really, really inexpensive insurance policy that I think pays dividends. One, by being assured that we're going to have a lower rate when we have to bond. But how angry do you think your folks are going to be when all of a sudden we've got a major, major problem, and it's going to be services that we can't supply? People get a whole lot more upset when they have no electricity or no water than about anything I can imagine. And water's one of those big things. The 2-year, as far as I'm concerned, I like a 5-year. I like the idea of a 5-year. I like the idea of a lower rate stretched over 5 years, because it makes it easier for us to tell our people, you know, it's basically cost of living. That's in essence what it is. But we can come back every 2 years and revisit it to see if we have to tweak it. And that's something that we can do. We don't need legislation for that. We have the ability to do that already. So as far as consensus, I'm certainly in favor of option B. I don't like increases in tax, if you want to call it that. It's a service tax. We're supplying a necessary item for people at a very reasonable cost, and I want to assure that they get it when they want it, not just when we can get it to them when things happen to work right. So,
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do rate increases. And I absolutely understand the need, that it's critical infrastructure for our city. As Mr. Johnson said, we deliver water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I'm really proud of our Water Services Department and the work that they have done and that they continue to do. They are extremely reliable department and are Johnny on the spot no matter what happens anywhere in the city. So, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, I think that we have a 5-year plan. Nobody's saying to throw this 5-year plan in the trash, but to adopt the first 2 years of it, and then reassess the where we are in 2 years, and then adopt the next 2 or maybe even 3 years of it. But somewhere in between, to take another look at this like we've done in the past. We've kind of set that expectation, I think, for our residents already, that we're going to look at this every 2 years. That's number one. I'm not going to be agreeable to adopting a 5-year plan. I would be open to a 2-year plan. Secondly, I feel like I want to know what the pro forma looks like with the repayment of the money. And that's a question that I feel like I want to have answered. Obviously, I don't believe there's a consensus to get that in. I still want the information, even if nobody else wants it. Obviously, if everybody's willing to move on without having that information, whether, looking at what it would look like to pay that money back when we have basically a large amount of money coming from the federal government that's primarily going to be dedicated to infrastructure, that's fine. If nobody else wants to have that information, I want it. And I'd like to have that information before I'm asked to take this vote. So, but I do not object to raising rates. I think people are misunderstanding what I'm saying. So I don't think we should adopt a 5-year plan. I think 2 years has worked fine for us so far. I don't believe it's going to affect our creditworthiness as far as we have a 5-year plan. And as Ms. Rios said, our bond counsel is aware that we have done our rate increases as we've needed to do. So I'm not objecting to that. I just don't think 5 years is where the council had said we wanted to be. And me personally, I would like to have all of the information. Where are we with paying the money back? What does this pro forma look like with paying the money back? So for those 2 reasons, I'm not going to be providing a consensus today. Thank you.
Level the increases over 5 years. Okay, I do believe we have a consensus for that.
Okay, Mayor, thank you very much. Are you going to talk about public outreach? We did want to just brief you real quickly on public outreach, then on that plan.
Mayor, Council, we've been actively involved with the Public Affairs Office and looking at all the different aspects of our outreach plan. What they're looking at now is a plan that includes video presentations and answers to the questions, similar to what we've done on the Glendale Golf Course, and the cable items that Mr. Bessinger had done, and I wanted to just kind of go over this with you. We're going to do the Glendale website. We're going to update the water website and the Glendale 11, and then make a very active use of the social media, which includes Facebook, Twitter, and Vimeo and Instagram, press releases, and then use the council members' newsletters, and also take advantage of sending information to our customers and community associations.
Go ahead,
Vice
Lon.
Mayor, I did have a question, thank you, Vice Mayor, that I forgot to ask. When we were talking about the western area, it brought to mind that we do have a franchise agreement, and were those revenues included, or projections for the revenues included in this pro forma? But we do have a franchise agreement, and should be, I don't know if it's actually, there's still a lot of development happening, but we are going to be generating revenue on water being provided, actually, and that's a good thing for our residents to know also, is that not only is it not costing us anything, we're going to be generating revenue off of water being provided out in the western area. But I'd just like to know if there was any way even to include that in the pro forma.
Mayor, or Vice Mayor, members of the council, I'm conferring here for a moment with Ms. Camacho, but I believe the revenue from that franchise agreement is going into the general fund.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
I think that concludes our presentation.
Any other questions?
Vice Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
I just want to make it clear that, as I see it, what we've done in the past on these rate increases is staff's presented a 5-year projection, and we've formalized the first 2 years. And then we come back and we get another 5-year projection, and we formalize the next 2 years. And I think that that's what the council member was advocating for today, and I would have liked to seen that too, because it keeps these rates present to us on an every other year basis. I know that this council inherited a 0.7% sales tax increase. Though we have said that at times past that we ought to be analyzing that sales tax increase on a regular basis, it doesn't happen unless a council member brings it up. And staff's attitude is, well, you are inherently considering it when you do your budget work. And I just think that on issues like this, that it ought to be more clear, more obvious, and more present to us what we're doing with the rates that we charge our customers, who happen to also be our bosses. And that's where I stand on this. So, thank you.
Mayor, question, and I just text the city manager to ask just to be sure. If hypothetically, if a 5-year plan was after the process and was approved, there's nothing that prevents the council from meeting at a 2-year mark, correct, and benchmarking this, and if everything was tracking in the right direction, then we're good and we don't need any further action. Is that correct?
Mayor, members of the council, that's correct. And also, we do come to council every year. Usually it's in January, sometimes it's been in December, with a forecast. And what we would do is then we would build in those forecasted rate increases because they're already known, and we can show you the impact during that process in January when we do our major fund forecasts.
Mayor, thank you. And so then that's what I would ask. We're going to have to go through the process, but I'd like to have that implemented, that for certain we are meeting and benchmarking at the 2-year mark, and if everything's good, we just keep going. But I'd like to ask that. There's nothing that prevents that, and that's was asking the city manager over a text message because I wasn't sure. I think that resolves some. And then just to the Councilmember Tomachoff's request for information, I'm not opposed to getting that information back to the council. if a council member asks for information, we should get it. Other than that, thank you.
Mayor, I just wanted to, so I thought that we were doing that anyway. What Ms. Rios just spoke about is that we already had a 5-year plan. We just adopted 2 years worth of rate increases. But weren't we already doing it, what you just said? Basically including that in our forecast? Because we adopted the rates 2 years at a time prior to them going into effect.
Mayor, members of the council, when we do the forecast, we only put rate increases that have been approved. So if you adopt 5 years, then we'll put them in for the full 5 years. But for example, and I think I showed it earlier, this year in January when we did the forecast, we had no rate increases because this was the last year of the rate increase. So we only include them in the forecast model if they've been approved by council.
Mayor? Well, and it seems that there's a consensus to do a 5-year plan, but wouldn't it be possible to say that these are the numbers that are in your 5-year plan, putting them in some other color or a square or something to note that they haven't been ratified by a vote, but that these are the rates that are in your 5-year plan, and they could still be presented in the forecast, so we could see, obviously, that they're necessary. I mean, they don't necessarily so I guess the point I'm trying to make is I'm not objecting to the 5-year plan. I'm just saying that I think we should adopt the rates 2 years at a time. So, but you could still use the 5-year plan in your forecast as long as you identify that it's part of the 5-year plan but not yet adopted by council. Couldn't you?
Mayor, members of the council, we can do that. That's correct. We can do that. It's just that's not been our practice in the
Okay,
past.
that's what I was asking, though. It's possible.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to shut this one down and move on to item number 4.
Council committees.
Excuse me, Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report is Amy Hanlong, Executive Assistant to the City Manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. There are currently 3 council committees: the Government Services Committee, the Business Services Committee, and the Temporary Code Review Committee. Your council guidelines outline that the council will make appointments for any vacancies the first workshop in June of each year. For purposes of today's workshop, the council only needs to make appointments for the Government Services Committee. The current members of the GSC are Councilmember Aldama, who serves as the chair, Vice Mayor Hugh, and Councilmember Turner. The council guidelines specify that council members may serve on the committee for 2 consecutive years. Councilmember Aldama was appointed in June of 2019 and is completing his second full term, creating 1 open vacancy. Vice Mayor Hugh and Councilmember Turner were appointed in 2020, and they are eligible for reappointment. With that, I'll turn the discussion over to you for appointment to the GSC.
Well, I guess I'd like to start off with something that I've had a few people ask me about, a little concerning. I don't even know how we came to a decision that we would have 3 council members on these committees. Several people have asked me, is this not problematic if you have 3 council members and any one of those 3 happen to talk with one other council member anywhere about something that's moving forward? Isn't that likely going to create a problem with open meeting violations? And I think it could. But I guess my next question is, why do we need 3 council members to commit time on a committee like that? Why is not 1 or 2 sufficient?
Mayor, I believe that's stated in your council guidelines that you have adopted. Those council guidelines are developed by you and at your discretion, so if any changes need to be made, that can be made at the discretion of the council.
Okay, well, and that's what I was trying to figure out. I don't remember the discussion, but we've talked about a lot of things. The other side to that is I don't know if there's council members that just simply don't have enough time to meet that requirement or want to. So I'd like to discuss that just a little bit with the council. Do you folks feel that moving on as we've been doing is necessary, or can we change the requirements to have just 1 council member on that committee? Go ahead.
Mayor, thank you. I believe the current process is appropriate, and the reason I say that is, as we study these items, whether it's in GSC or whether it's a code committee or a business committee or whatever committees we create, I think having more council members up to what would not constitute a violation of open meeting law is appropriate, because the process educates those on the committee to a much higher degree than they would have been educated on the issues had they just been approached during council meetings. So if you have just one member on, from council on a committee, and then you bring a pretty important topic from that committee to this council, you only have one person's perspective that has actually had all the experience and the knowledge and the resources provided to them to really study out and understand that topic. And for that reason, I would be opposed to changing the number of council members on these committees, because I think it is there for that purpose, to provide council a better insight without violating open meeting laws onto the critical issues that the committees address. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other discussion?
Mike's off, apologize. I agree with council member. I think 3 is probably about the right number, and there's a term limit that's kind of built into it. I think it's been working okay. Maybe other council members disagree, but.
Oh, I just wasn't sure if you were finished. Make sure. Okay. So I want to make sure that I understand that we're really only looking for someone for the Government Services Committee. Is that right? Because these other committees are terminating, so we're not going to be changing staff on there because they're literally going to be wrapping up here in a couple of months. So is that?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, that's correct. So you do have one vacancy with Councilmember Aldama completing his 2-year term. The other 2 are eligible for reappointment. So you have one vacancy, and then you have the reappointments if you choose to go in that direction. The other 2 committees, they have been extended, but there's no vacancies at this time.
Okay. I don't see that 3. I mean, Mr. Bailey can weigh in if he'd like to. I don't see any open meeting law issues with having 3 council members on a committee. In fact, I think it's been useful. I mean, we're going to have another code presentation here. I saw Mr. St. John lurking around back there somewhere. There he is. That there's already 3 council members that have already kind of, and then when they bring back the information, they bring back the information in a public meeting where we're able to discuss it and digest it, but they've already done a lot of the groundwork, which is, the value of these committees. So I personally don't feel like there's a reason to change it to 2 council members. And I'm willing to do my part. I'm not on the City Audit and Finance Committee. I don't see that on here. I think we already did those appointments. So, and I'm not on that anymore, but I'm on the Valley Metro Audit and Finance Subcommittee, and that takes a lot of time. But I'm willing to do my part and serve on whatever committees the city needs me to serve on. So, thank you.
To be clear, I didn't say that there was an open meeting violation. I just said the potential with 3 members on it talking to one other member. There could be a potential. That's all I was bringing up. Any other comments? Turn your speaker on.
I would be, again, I would like to ask for consensus that we reappoint Councilmember Hugh and Councilmember Turner to the committee, and then whoever else wants to step up.
Well, I would like to bring to everybody's attention, Mayor, if I could, that Councilmember Clark's not here, so I believe it's her by default.
Boy, is there a consensus for Councilmember Clark?
Well, Mayor, I would like to point out that the 2 committees that she's serving on are terminating in October, and so she wouldn't be, as of October, serving on any other committees. So I know she's not here, but I feel like she'd be willing to serve if we needed her to.
Do you need an answer right now?
I believe based on the guidelines that a decision is supposed to be made, but I'll let Michael weigh in on that.
Okay, why don't somebody text her real quick and ask her?
Again, these are your
She's
guidelines, so
listening,
there's
I'm
probably
sure.
some
Is she?
flexibility.
She's probably mad at me.
We can, he's texting her right now. Okay, what else do you have?
Actually, Mayor and Council, Councilmember Clark is not here, so it's probably, as you're referencing open meeting law stuff, we probably don't want to include her unless she calls in. And so what you may want to do is we can take a recess and we can reach out to her and talk to her about that and go to this other item, or if you'd like, there's no prohibition against you pushing this off for 2 weeks.
Okay, well, let's
It's
just table this item right now, move on to the next item. And then, so we can't reach out and text her and say, would you be willing to serve?
Mayor and Council, I think it'd be appropriate to step outside the meeting and do it, and then we can come back in the meeting and do it, rather than having a conversation with her
Understand?
in the midst of the meeting.
We're going to table this right now.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so whoever wants to step out. Okay, what's next?
City Code, Chapter 24 revisions.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide the last staff report for today's workshop is Rick St. John, Deputy City Manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. This is hopefully the last conversation we'll have about these Chapter 24 revisions in our code. If you recall, vehicle and traffic exist all over different chapters of our code. We're trying to combine it all into one chapter, that chapter being Chapter 24. We've done a lot of work with the Code Review Committee, a lot of recommendations, a lot of conversation with the council. We think we're very close to a final product. I'll say 90% done. Little conversation today on a few minor adjustments, and then we'll be ready to bring this to a voting meeting and start enforcing. So today I am seeking council consensus on several minor amendments that we'll walk through one by one. And as a reminder, the General City Code's enforced as written and typically doesn't allow for variances, relief, or grandfathered rights. The first item I'd like to talk about is commercial vehicles. We had a very long discussion in our last workshop about commercial vehicles, and to provide some clarity, I've added our Code Review Committee and I are recommending that we add a new definition for commercial vehicle classifications. And the classifications are 1 through 8, from smallest to largest, and seem to be classified in a reasonable way. The enforcement side of commercial vehicle parking would kind of follow the definitions of those classifications. And so storing commercial vehicles is prohibited. That's always been in our code, and we recommend it remain in the code. And the parking of commercial vehicles on residential properties will be limited by classification as defined in the definition section for commercial vehicle classifications. This council in our last workshop wanted to allow 2 or fewer vehicles, commercial vehicles parked on a residential property. There was a lot of discussion about small commercial vehicles, 4-door sedans, for example, that were wrapped for marketing for a real estate agent or somebody in a private business. And as you can see from the classifications, that would be considered a Class 1. And so in the enforcement, Class 1 would limit 2 per residential property. Class 2 would limit 2 per residential property. Class 3 would limit 1 per residential property, excluding the heavy-duty pickups that go up to 19,500 pounds gross vehicle weight rating, and we would limit 2. And then Class 4 through 8, we would not allow the parking of these classes or classifications of commercial vehicles on residential properties except as allowed under Arizona revised statutes for public service, public safety, first responders, essentially. And then the B section is still as it was written before. Parking is permitted for purpose of delivery or temporary loading and unloading. To go back to the definition of commercial motor vehicle, the council gave consensus to raise the gross vehicle weight rating to 19,500 pounds based on the fact that there are heavy-duty pickup trucks that can reach that limit that are for personal use. The recommendation from the Code Review Committee that I agree with is that we have two separate standards. One, maintain the 10,000 gross vehicle weight rating for commercial vehicles with an exception for heavy-duty pickup trucks, but not allowing those other, so under the Class 3, you can see the first three kind of look like a box truck of some sort, and the last one's the heavy-duty pickup. So we would allow the heavy-duty pickup up to 19,500, but not allow the other pictured vehicles in the Class 3 classification. So again, council consensus before was 2 per residential property. You can see that you can have a Class 1 and a Class 2. You can have 2 Class 1s. You can have 2 Class 2s. You can have 2 heavy-duty pickups, and I'll need to rewrite that Class 3 a little bit to match this gross vehicle weight rating change. But we would limit the gross vehicle weight rating to 10,000 pounds as it is in the code today. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about this section.
Whoops, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. St. John. So the Class 2 basically encompasses any type of a delivery van. You know, you see like contractors and carpet cleaner people and all the people that use like a variety of different, because the weights to me are way too confusing. I don't know how much even my own vehicle weighs. I have no idea. So that doesn't help me a whole lot. So I just want to make sure I understand that if it's there's no other kind of van that would fit into Class 3, right?
Mayor, Councilmember Thomas Chaff, I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, that's what I want. That's what I want to make sure. So the walk-in, basically, Mayor, if I could, that's like a UPS kind of a truck, basically. Is that what that is?
Mayor, Councilmember Thomas Chaff, you're talking about the first picture under
the
Class 3?
Under Class 3, it says
yes.
walk-in. So
That's like an APS truck, I believe.
Okay.
Or FedEx, thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure, because when I start looking at the weights, I have no idea what we're talking about, but as long as, you know, and the instance that I spoke of was it's a husband and wife, they both drive vans. We certainly don't want to put anybody, you know, make it hard for them to make a living, so I think this will work. And just to clarify, Mayor, if I could, we are actually increasing the number then based on what we're being presented today. Right now, it's 1. And we're of the Class 1 and Class 2, our code currently allows 1, and we're increasing that to 2 under Class 1 or 2. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Thomas Chaff, that is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. I support that.
I have a question. I got a few calls from people, and it's something that you don't have listed here because quite honestly, we never talked about it, and that's historic military vehicles. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be for recreation. It's certainly not commercial, but it does fall into a class of whether people use them in parades or whatever supporting military functions. It's something that we never did discuss. There's not a lot of them, but I'm afraid that they're going to fall right in the middle of this thing, which is effectively going to tell them, no, you can't have what you've had. So I'd
Mayor,
like an exception to be made in there somewhere on historic military vehicles.
Mayor, I'm not sure that a historic military vehicle would be classified as a commercial vehicle if it was privately owned and used for private purposes. If it was, there does happen to be one in the neighborhood that I live, and it is not parked, it's stored, and it's a personal vehicle, and so it doesn't violate the provisions of our current code. But if I hear you correctly, you want us to address those vehicles somewhere in Chapter 24 that allows for them to be parked and stored, or just parked?
Well, I need them to be addressed because I do know that some of these larger trucks can easily go 20,000 pounds of gross vehicle weight. Councilmember Tomachoff was saying, you know, I don't know what the vehicle weighs. It's not what it weighs, it's what it's capable of weighing fully loaded is where you get gross vehicle weight from. So it's something that could weigh, you know, 12,000 pounds, but have a gross vehicle weight of 20,900, and that immediately puts them into a class 5 or 6. I
Mayor.
think that's problematic for somebody that doesn't use it commercially, that uses it only for parades. Somebody maybe has a fire truck, something like that. Now, obviously, we don't want them sitting out in the front yard, but I don't remember us ever talking about that, and yet I do know a couple people that own fire trucks that use them specifically for breast awareness, cancer research, things like that. So I don't know as though we really effectively covered this as well as we should have, but there are so many scenarios that you can fall into. It's virtually impossible to cover everything.
Mayor, members of the council, again, I'm not sure they would fall under how we're defining commercial vehicles. So although it might meet a Class 5 description, as we see under commercial vehicles, it's not a commercial vehicle if it's privately owned and not used for commercial purposes. So if you remember in the original definition, there was an A and a B side to what a commercial vehicle is. The A side is it's used for commercial enterprise, and then the B side is 3 axles or above this gross vehicle weight rating, has a wrap or something on it that distinguishes it for the purpose of commercial use. So if the fire truck, retired fire engine, or military vehicle was used in parades, but it was a personally owned vehicle not used for commercial purposes, it wouldn't be classified as a commercial vehicle. Now, it would have to meet the regulations that this council has adopted for parking at the front of the residence. They can park those vehicles in a screened side yard or rear yard.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, Councilmember Malnar and I have served on this committee and have been dealing with this for longer than I've been on the council, it seems, but that obviously is not possible. So, and just to reiterate what the Deputy City Manager said, those examples that were given are of personal vehicles. They wouldn't meet the definition of a commercial vehicle, and therefore these weight limits wouldn't apply. So for, I guess, one example would be, if you have a personally owned fire truck and you use it in those types of examples, parades, or just for your own enjoyment, that's a personal vehicle. Now, if you have it wrapped with Firehouse Subs advertising or a Firehouse Subs billboard on it, and you use it in the capacity of promoting that business, then it would be a commercial vehicle. So in short, I'm comfortable with the definition the way it's been presented, and the classifications. I think the pictures help a lot, and the understanding of it's also how the vehicle is used. Thank you.
Okay. You're looking for a consensus?
Mayor, yes, sir.
Okay, not with me. It appears you do have a consensus.
Thank you. The next item we'll talk about is parking on residential lots. There's 2 pieces to this. In the Code Review Committee, in the Code Review Committee meeting, it was suggested that we change the distinction between lot sizes and what's allowed to have 40 feet versus 30 feet of contiguous driveway, 40% versus 50% of the total front yard improved for the purpose of parking or maneuvering vehicles. The current language in the zoning ordinance that we had council consensus to move to Chapter 24, the distinction was at 12,000 square feet. So lots above 12,000 square feet were allowed 40 feet of contiguous driveway and up to 40% of their total front yard improved for parking or maneuvering. Under 12,000 square feet was 30 feet of contiguous driveway and up to 50% of your front yard improved for parking or maneuvering. The recommendation from the committee is to lower the distinction to 8,000 square feet. So anything below 8,000 square feet would be 30 feet of contiguous driveway, up to 50% of your front yard improved for parking or maneuvering. Anything above 8,000 square feet would be 40 feet of contiguous drive and up to 40% of your front yard. And from speaking with the code official, we don't believe that this would have a significant impact on how things are being run in our community today, but it does make a clear distinction.
are you looking for?
There's one other item, I'm just leaving that out there for questions if there were any, but there's one other item, and this is the ordinance that Fountain Hills adopted, amended by the Code Review Committee in our last workshop. I was asked to bring this, by the council, I was asked to bring this back to the Code Review Committee. In the Fountain Hills ordinance, they allow one vehicle parked at the front of a residential property for every 750 square feet of livable space as specified by the county assessor's records. The Code Review Committee believes that for the city of Glendale, 400 square feet of livable area is a better standard for our residents. And so that is the recommendation coming forward today. And on those two items, making the distinction 8,000 square feet instead of 12,000 square feet, and then this new language that allows one vehicle for every 400 square feet of livable space on a residential property into the chapter for enforcement.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
Mr. St. John, on that 400 square feet, would that be 400 square feet or a portion thereof, or would it be for each complete 400 square feet?
Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Turner, that was a question that I wanted to ask the council in this conversation. Do we round up or round down? So a 1,300 square foot home is closer to 1,200 than 1,600 square feet. So would that be 3 vehicles? As a 1,200 square foot house would be allowed 3 vehicles? Or do we round up and allow 4 vehicles? And if not at 1,300 square feet, do we round up at 1,400 or do we round up at 1,500? So that's kind of a enforcement question that the council needs to deliberate.
And Mayor, if I could continue, I think that my sense of where the committee was, it was for every 400 square feet or portion thereof. So, you know, for 1,200 square feet, well, for $11.99, you'd be, well, no, for 1,200 square feet, you'd be allowed 3 vehicles. For 1,300 square feet, you'd be allowed 4. You wouldn't get the 5th vehicle allowed until you were at 1,600 square feet. So it'd be, that's what I think the committee, that was my sense of what the committee had
Mayor?
gelled on.
If I may, I believe that was the thought. And again, you got to remember, this is front yard or front driveway parking only. You can park whatever you can fit into your garage or into your side yard, into your backyard. That is not considered here. It's only front driveway parking that we're talking about.
So I am looking, Mayor, I am looking for consensus on those 2 items.
I guess my thought on that is, I mean, ever since I was a kid, we always rounded up to the next one. And in a case where, you know, if you have a 1,300 square foot home and our 1,310 square foot home, then I would say you go to 14, but that still doesn't get you more than 50% of that second 200 square feet. So I think you're still going to be limited to the 3 vehicles. That's just my thought.
I'm a little confused. Are we looking for consensus on the lot size and the, because my head was spinning when you were going through that description on lot size. I'm not sure I understand it. So can you maybe walk me, I want to make sure I understand it.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomchoff, sure. In the current zoning ordinance and what we have consensus to move into the code today, the general code, the distinction is at 12,000 square feet. The difference is how long of a driveway adjacent to the sidewalk you can have. Below 12,000 square feet, you can have up to 30 feet of contiguous drive. Above 12,000, you can have 40 feet. So they allow you an extra 10 feet of contiguous drive on the larger lot sizes. But they allow a smaller percentage on the larger lot sizes of your total front yard. So when you look at the square footage of your total front yard, excluding any sidewalks, but it does include any improved surface for a driveway leading to a garage, carport, or other parking area. It does include that. On the large lots, you get up to 40%. On the smaller lots, you get up to 50% of your total square footage can be improved for the purpose of maneuvering a car or parking a car.
Okay, Mayor. Okay, the second time I comprehended it, so it gets confusing. Now this said basically there's no grandfathering, so do we have people who already have the situation, and then are they going to now be in violation?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, what I'm hearing you ask is, do we have people between 8,000 and 12,000 square foot lot sizes that will be in violation if we make this change? And the simple answer is no, because we're being less restrictive on those lot sizes.
Okay,
So
right.
today, they're allowed to have 30 feet or up to 50%. We're changing that to 40 feet or up to 40%. So I guess there could be a certain number of lots that have 50% improved for parking or maneuvering, and they would technically be restricted to 40%, but I'm not aware of any particular cases where that exists.
Mr. St. John, to that point though, how active are code enforcement pushing that right now, where once we come up with all of this, that we know they're going to be much more persuasive?
Mayor, I'm aware of one case in the last 18 months where we actually had to measure the square footage of someone's front yard to determine whether they were at the 50% threshold. The lot size is it's R16, so it's a 6,000 square foot lot, and they were right at the cusp of 50%, depending on how wide their improved area for a circle drive is, would take them either below 50% or just above 50%. So we had to regulate them on that and how wide their circle drive could be. It's the only case that I'm aware of in 18 months, though. I know that it's been done on other cases in the past, but it's very few and far between.
So you're looking for consensus?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm a no. We have a consensus?
Mayor, this is the recommendation of the code committee?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll go along with it.
Okay, well, I don't know if we have a consensus or not. Okay, we do have a consensus, okay.
Mayor, our next item deals with the utility parking. This was another recommendation from the Code Review Committee, and it's a recommendation that makes sense. So previously it said that the utility trailer had to be owned, leased by the owner or occupant, either owned or leased, and we're adding or used for a commercial business. So if you are an employee of a company that has given you a truck and a utility trailer for your work that you take home, but you don't own or lease the trailer, it belongs to the company that you work for, you would now be allowed to park that under, because this provision was added, you'd be allowed to park that on your property. And I am looking for consensus on that small language change.
Well, I can't get anybody to move their heads, so. Okay, apparently you have it.
Next is RV parking and storage. This was a misstep in our original presentation. We simply are adding the language that says that RVs parked on residential properties should be owned or leased by the owner or occupant of the principal use of the property. Same as the language for utility trailers before we added the commercial purpose use. And I am looking for consensus on that item as well.
Good.
I would like to also have the council consider, the last time we discussed this, we decided that we would allow 2 RVs on the front property, on the driveway, and that was to accommodate, say, for example, a motorhome and, say, a boat, and we said that was good. Some members of our committee had some concern about that, and I'd like to have a little discussion here. If we could change it to do just that, to have one RV that is a livable RV and then one that is a towable, so that you don't end up basically providing permission for residents to put two big motorhomes on their front property. That they could have a motorhome, and they could have a boat, and they could have one or two commercial vehicles. Plus, they could have all their other vehicles based on how big their property was. So I wanted to see if we could get consensus to make that minor change to allow the two that we described last time, 2 RVs, to be, one of those RVs would be a livable space RV, the other one would be a towable RV.
A towable?
For example,
Like
a
a
boat,
trailer?
a boat, a
But what about a
trailer.
travel trailer?
Travel trailer that's.
Is livable though, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's towable too, so it'd fall under the towable end.
Oh, okay, one would be required to be towable.
If it didn't have an engine, it would be towable.
That's true too.
I
But then it would be
think you're
inoperable.
just making it so confusing that nobody's gonna understand.
Okay, well, let's see what anybody else says. If I'd like to, again, I would like to at least make that minor change. I think it clarifies it for people, knowing that we don't want to see two large motorhomes on front driveways.
Mayor, I don't know what the difference is if somebody has a motorhome and a travel trailer, or 2 travel trailers, or, I mean, honestly, I don't know what the difference is for what we're basically trying to do is not have basically a parking lot in front of homes or RV storage and all of that. So as long as they both belong to the occupant, leased or owned, whatever, I don't really see that there would be how many people is this even going to affect? I mean, do we have a lot of people with a bunch of motorhomes, drivable motorhomes parked in their driveway?
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, not that I'm aware of, but there are instances throughout the city where that exists.
And I hadn't seen one of these before, but there's vans now that are sort of like motorhomes. Have you seen them? They look like those Amazon delivery vans, but they're motorhomes. So were those considered? Are those motorhomes? Because they're really not motorhomes. They're pretty small. They're a very short wheelbase for a motorhome, but my neighbors just rented one and went on a vacation. I went over and looked at it. I was like, what the heck is this thing? I'd never seen one before. But is that considered a motorhome, or it is a motorhome or a personal vehicle?
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, I'm pulling up the definition of a recreational vehicle as adopted by this
Livable
council.
meaning, so what, the definition of livable means if you can sleep in it? Or, well, shoot, when I was young, we used to camp in the back of the pickup. Is that?
So Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, the definition adopted by council is for recreation vehicle, a vehicle portable home designed as a temporary dwelling for travel, recreational, and vacation uses.
Okay.
Such home shall not exceed the limit set forth by the state of movement. Okay, that's not. A recreational vehicle shall include a motorhome, mini motorhome, recreational van,
Okay,
tent trailer, camp trailer, watercraft boat, or truck camper.
okay. That answers my question, thank you.
I actually don't like your idea this time, which is
Okay.
very unusual. I usually like all your ideas.
Okay, I appreciate that. What's Councilmember Hughes say?
Is there a consensus on Mr. Melner's idea?
Okay, that's all right.
Okay, so do we have a consensus with everything else that was?
Mayor, the only other item with recreational vehicles was that the vehicle be owned by the occupant or main tenant of the property.
Separate consensus?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Go ahead.
How are you going to determine that? Knock on the door and ask for the registration and driver's license?
Mayor, Councilmember Aldama will, from beyond the boundaries of the lot, do what we can to determine who the registered owner of the vehicle is. If there's no license plate visible, then yes, we would have to talk to the homeowner and try to determine in conversation with them who the vehicle belongs to.
And then if they decline, just walk away?
Mayor, Councilmember Aldama, it's not information that we can force.
Wow. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, so is there consensus on the last item? Okay, sounds like you have it.
So I'm assuming the idea is we don't want people to be able to like lease a space in their driveway for somebody to come and park there. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's reasonable.
Mayor, a couple of quick items then. Under this chapter, code needs the opportunity to either file civil or criminal charges depending on whether it's a repeat offender. So very typically, a civil citation is issued first. If the case is won in court and the judge rules that the person is in violation and they're fined, but they refuse to come into compliance even after being fined by a court, we go back and issue a criminal citation so that a judge can order the remediation and compliance. Is there consensus for us to add language to this chapter that allows for civil citation and then criminal citation to gain compliance?
Well, for me, criminal, no, but that's just my opinion. Discussion?
Here.
Go ahead.
It would be a hammer that was seldom used, but it's a necessary hammer in the most egregious cases.
Mayor, if I may provide some clarity, criminal citations are only used to gain compliance from the homeowner or person responsible. It's not used to provide additional punishment. So we don't seek jail time, we don't seek higher fines, we seek the court's ability to mandate remediation and that the home be brought into compliance.
How would, like, if we were to do a clean and lean type situation where maybe it's not a parking issue, but it's a upkeep issue, then I'm gonna wait till they're done with their little sidebar over there. I know we have the ability, I believe we have the ability to clean and lean, don't we? Do you know? We do?
But it does go through a hearing process.
But doesn't this go through a hearing process too?
Did you hear the question?
Mayor, I'm sorry, no, I didn't.
So in a situation where somebody gets cited and they don't clean up the yard or whatever, all the junk they have in their yard, let's say, don't we, and rather than filing a criminal complaint, couldn't we clean and lean? Where does the clean and lean part of this come in? Because this isn't just about parking, this is about any code violation, right?
So, Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Tomachov, I was just talking to Mr. Bailey about this, and there are certain nuances to it. So there are things that we can do as far as clean and lean after a civil citation is issued and a judge rules on our behalf. However, the opinion of the code official is that we're better protected, if you will, under the criminal citation because we can go onto the property with force if needed because it's now a mandate of the court.
Okay, and then, Mayor, if I could, so for the purpose of I mean, when would it escalate to the point of, because the idea of the neighborhood, of the neighbors, who probably most likely are the complainants here, want the property cleaned up. They don't really want the person to get a ticket. They just want the property cleaned up. So would this accomplish that?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachov, it would, yes.
Okay. So they would get a civil, then they would get a criminal, and then we would clean and lean it, but basically protected because now it's a criminal complaint and you can enter the property safely. I just want to make sure I understand that.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachov, I would say that sums it up, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, any other quick discussion? No? Consensus? Okay, right now I'm not sure. Okay, and I'm a no on the consensus, but you do have it. Okay, so was that your last item?
This is the last item right here, and it's simply adding the word permitted. So the city recognizes that by permitted design, and these are for exceptions, because there are permitted properties that went through proper design review and the permitting process in zoning that may not be able to meet some of the mandates this council it will adopt in a future voting meeting in this chapter of the code. And so we need some mechanism for determining how to handle those cases without disrupting the homeowner who had everything properly permitted. And so the recommendation and consensus from council was that the code official and the city prosecutor would agree and make a note in our system that it's unreasonable or it creates something that is functionally incapable of being done. And then we wouldn't pursue the case based on those factors. We've only added the word permitted to the language of this paragraph to ensure that people that reconstruct their home without being properly permitted don't also fall into this category.
You have a question?
Just a comment. Yeah, again, we discussed in our code committee many times that there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. And we made and felt like appropriate that when there are exceptions to the rule that were properly followed code at the time, they built something, the builder built something that currently now is going to fall outside of code, that we felt like it was important that there be a means by which that person would not be cited because they did follow the code at the time that their permit, again, zoning permits is what I'm talking about. They followed zoning permits and did the proper permitting to get their property into the condition that it is today. Though under new code, it may be in violation. This will allow the code official and others to look at that and make a determination that there is not a violation. I think it's important that we have that catch-all for those circumstances.
Thank you, Mayor. So how is this memorialized then, that the property's been deemed in compliant, out of compliance but compliant? How is it memorialized so that if we get a new code administrator or that the house changes, somebody buys the house or whatever, that they don't have somebody knock on their door and they have to start the whole process all over again?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachoff, we would memorialize it in our software system that code, development services, fire marshal's office, everybody uses for these types of things.
Okay, so basically it shows some boxes checked that it's compliant with our code, and that I just wouldn't want to do this and then somebody buys the house and then they have to deal with it again. So okay, thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Is there a consensus on this? Okay, you do have consensus on that.
Thank you, Mayor. That's the conclusion of my presentation.
Okay, and going back to item number 4, Mr. Melner, would you like to fill on that position on the committee?
I will take that responsibility since I got a nay from our beloved council member.
I said I would do it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, he said, do you want to do it? And I said, no, but I will.
Okay.
That's
Then
why
it
I don't
sounds
want
like
to, but
that
I
we have
will.
a volunteer.
That's why I was asking Mr. Melner, what do you like to do? Because you already said, no, you really didn't want to.
Okay, I said before, I would, if nobody else will do it, I will do it.
Why don't you guys do rock, paper, scissors?
Okay.
I'm willing to do it. I may miss some meetings because I have other commitments. I don't even know what the meeting schedule is, so, but it needs to be done, so I'll do it. I literally said, no, but I will, so. Oh,
Okay.
okay, you took that as a no.
I was trying to give you a
All right, well, thank you. We'll put him on the spot next time.
So do you want to do rock, paper, scissors?
No, I'll let her win me.
Okay, so Ms. Tomachoff will fill that position.
Sounds good.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, so moving on, we did item number 5. So city manager's report.
Mayor, members of the council, just 2 quick items. So Thursday, June 10th is a day that I know all of you have been waiting for some time, and that's the official groundbreaking for the Crystal Lagoons Island Resort Project. And so we've got a large group of people that are, we think will be in attendance, and so we're looking forward to your participation. As you all know, we think this is a real game changer as a project, and we couldn't be more excited. In sticking with the Westgate theme, if you're familiar with the what's called Enfuego development, this is the development on the north side of Glendale Avenue between 95th and 91st. We got an updated report from the developer, which is Diversified Partners, and you know they've already opened up Starbucks, Raising Cane's is opening up, Barrels Pizza, Biscuits Cafe, and Jack in the Box. They also just announced they're going to be, and I hope I'm going to not do this justice, but they've just signed a restaurant out of Los Angeles called Mio Rong, which will soon be open, and it's a Korean restaurant, and this is their first Arizona expansion, and so they're excited about that. They now only have about 1,500 square feet of vacant space remaining in that entire development. So that is leased up, even during the pandemic, is leased up very, very quickly. And again, we look forward to seeing you on Thursday. That's my report.
Thank you. City Attorney's report?
No report, thank you.
Thank you. Council items of special interest. On the agenda, the council items of special interest, each council member has the opportunity to indicate topics they'd like to have discussed in the future. Councilmember Aldama, any?
None at this time.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark's not here. Councilmember Milner, any?
Yes, Mayor. Has to do with some of the things that we've discussed in the last few council meetings. I would like to place a future item of special interest for the Chapter 24 revisions that we'll be approving in council at some time. That 6 months after they are in effect, that we receive a report back from the Code Committee, or that, not the committee, but from the Code Department, from Mr. St. John, on how these processes are being implemented, the concerns that have been brought up, and also any suggested changes that we might want to consider. I know what happens many times on these revisions like this, we make them and then we forget about them, and then we never really see how they're working until many, many years later, and we decide to look at them. And I think it'd be prudent for us to take a look at the changes we made and just have our Code Department and Mr. St. John let us know of any concerns. And again, I would take that as an item of special interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tomachoff.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Turner.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Nothing, Mayor.
And I have nothing, so moving on. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
So move.
Second.
Okay, a motion to go into executive session, Councilmember Turner. Second from Councilmember Tomachoff. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, vote nay. Appears the ayes have it, do have it. Council meeting is recessed.